Death at the Trade Show. Target Practice Mysteries 3. Written by Nikki Haverstock. Narrated by the author. Chapter 1. I'd never felt so glamorous in my entire life as I did standing at the doorway of the Westmound's private Learjet we had taken to the outdoor industry trade show. The tarmac of the airport was free of snow, unlike the Wyoming airport we had left. The moment was like something out of a fashion magazine shoot as Liam offered me a steadying hand. I started down the stairs, but the vision of myself as the height of sophistication quickly evaporated when a hard shove from behind, combined with the smooth leather sole of my boot slipping on the stair, sent me flying into Liam's chest. He managed to catch me under my arms as Moo, my faithful Great Dane companion, pushed past me and clambered down the stairs. I felt Liam's chuckle more than heard it on the loud tarmac. He held me while I got my feet back on the asphalt and straightened my clothing, which had slipped up to my ribcage. I was in my dark fuchsia form-fitted leather jacket, dark pants with zippers and fashionable stitching, and the most beautiful boots with real laces that came up to my knees. He leaned in close to whisper in my ear, his breath on my neck. "I told you that you needed better traction." I laughed. He had warned me way back at the Westmound Center for Competitive Shooting Sports that the boots didn't look like they were the best choice for winter walking. I had insisted they were boots, and boots were winter clothing. He hadn't said anything when I slipped in the parking lot as I maneuvered my huge suitcase, or when I slipped as we got out of the van at the tiny regional airport near the center. Having his warm arms around me seemed like more than adequate compensation for him saying that he told me so. He offered me his arm in the dark as the airport staff unloaded our luggage onto a cart. Moo yanked on his leash, eager to get away from the loud runway. I checked over my shoulder to see that Orion, Liam's best friend, and Westmound marketing director, was offering Mary assistance out of the plane. Flying private was the way to go. I might be spoiled for a lifetime. An older gentleman emerged from the charter company's doors and offered Elizabeth Anderson, owner of Westmound Industries and Liam's mother, his arm before escorting her inside. With all 5 of us off the jet, 6 including Moo, we headed inside. Stepping inside, the distinguished gentleman turned from Elizabeth and called out to Liam. "Liam, good to see you. You look more like your dad every year." They hugged with lots of masculine backsmacking. He moved over to hug Orion as well, then turned to Mary and me. He smiled at us and approached while asking Liam for clarification. "I thought Robbie and Jess were going to come to represent Westmound Center." Liam shook his head. "They got the stomach flu, and we made a switch." Jess and her husband had been excited to go to the OIT show, but last night they had gotten sick. And by gotten sick, I meant that they were stranded in the bathroom. Jess told me, over the phone, that she had slept on the cool bathroom floor with a bucket by her side. This morning had been a lobbying session by all the employees at the Westmound Center to see which 2 would take their place. Half of the people were removed from the running by existing commitments at the center during the OIT show's 4-day run. But what really cinched it for Mary and me was the fact that the hotel was booked solid, so whoever went would need to share the king-size bed set aside for them. We hadn't hesitated for a second. A king-size bed for 2 small females would be practically like sleeping in separate rooms. Liam had made some calls to get the credentials changed to our names and returned with an additional surprise. He had also made arrangements for Moo to join us as a special guest. The gentleman was older, but in no way elderly. He was handsome with salt and pepper hair and a mustache. He extended his hand to me. "I'm John." "Nice to meet you. I'm Di." Mary extended her hand too. "I'm Mary. Are you John Beckman?" Mary had written articles for the archery industry for several years, and if she was asking, then she probably already knew the answer. He smiled back. "Why, yes, I am." She started gushing. "I'm a big fan of Beckman's. It's my favorite outdoor industry store. After church, Liam, Di, and I stop in to see what's new at our local store. It's a weekly ritual." I'm always glad to meet a Beckman's customer. I would love to chat with you both at some point about what products you find most interesting. He probably said that a million times in his life, but he seemed genuinely pleased to hear Mary was a fan. I gave him another look. Beckman's was a nationwide outdoor sporting goods store with hundreds of locations. They were built to look like giant log cabins from the outside, and inside they carried everything you would ever need to survive in the wild. This included camping supplies, firearms, bows, barbecues, boats, and everything you could possibly imagine in camo. If I ever needed a camo couch, I would go to Beckman's. We stopped in after church every week to wander around. Liam looked to see what Westmound products were in stock, asked what product salesmen were recommending, and eyed the previously owned guns. I usually hit the clothing and shoe sections to help rebuild my Southern California wardrobe to Wyoming wear. I also took a quick spin through the high-end gun room. There I would look at the intricately carved shotguns nestled in specialty cases lined in velvet, with a nook for each piece of equipment. They were works of art with exquisite attention to detail and price tags to match. The room also carried high-end competitive rifles that looked like something out of a video game. Liam had mentioned that Beckman's was owned by a family friend, but I hadn't realized we would meet him here, though really I had barely spoken to Liam since he told Mary and me that we would be attending the OIT show. The jet from Salt Lake with Elizabeth and Orion was set to arrive a few hours after we were informed, and even with the most frantic packing of our lives, we ran late. Luckily, flying private meant the plane could wait for us. Once in the jet, Liam, Elizabeth, and Orion started to work while Moo, Mary, and I entertained ourselves. Mary thought the highlight was a tiny drawer under the seat that popped out and was full of candy. I considered the fact that we didn't have to go through security and I didn't have to remove my shoes and belt to be the best part. The carts with our luggage rolled past and out the front door. John offered Elizabeth his arm and said, "Let me show you our car for the week." I went to the parking lot where a car was waiting. It was black and sleek, much longer than typical. In the lights of the entrance, you could see the paint was smooth and clean, without a smudge, even in this winter slush. The driver got out and greeted us with a smile. "I'm Jack. I'm thrilled to be driving you this week. If you need anything, day or night, I am at your service." Moo pulled on his leash to inspect the man. Jack chuckled. "I see you brought a horse with you." He scratched Moo on the neck, and Moo's eyes rolled back in his head. His back foot lifted in the air and scratched at the air in time to Jack's scratches. I laughed. "His name is Moo, and you might be his new best friend." "Any dog is a friend of mine." Jack opened up a door and offered me his hand. "Please, get in the car. It's cold out here." Moo leapt into the door ahead of me while Mary and I followed. We scooted in as far as possible to leave room for the rest of the group. Mary pulled out her phone and flipped through the messages. "I can't believe we gotta come. This is going to be awesome. Everyone is so jealous." "Really?" I leaned closer to see the screen while Moo wedged in on my other side. He stuck his nose into the window and whined. It was far too cold to have the windows down, plus these didn't appear to be the type to open at all. But how do you explain that to a dog? Long nose smears were left on the glass when he finally gave up and flopped his large square head onto my lap. Mary tilted her screen in my direction and scrolled down the list of messages. "See? Everyone wants me to take pictures or ask questions or something. They're dying that they can't be here." "How did they find out that you were coming already?" It had only been a handful of hours since we knew ourselves. I might have posted online in a few places." Mary avoided my glance. I let out a hearty laugh. "So while I was racing around like crazy, you posted online?" "Hey now, that only took a few seconds while you spent 15 minutes trying on the right outfit." I peeked out the window at Liam and Orion rolling out a cart of luggage. Liam looked at the car and I looked away, hoping that he hadn't caught me staring. "Okay, so we both had important stuff to do. Let's not mention this again. If people want to come to the OIT show, then why don't they?" "Not just anyone can come, Di. You have to be associated with an exhibitor, buying for a retail location, or media, that kind of thing. Joe Schmo won't be there, except for the people wanting sponsorship for their hunting shows. They'll be everywhere, even though they're not really supposed to be soliciting sponsorship there. Mary might be almost a decade younger than me, but in our friendship, she was the expert on the industry, while I was just learning. Have you ever been before? Once, a few years ago. I worked with the staff to write industry articles on new products and features, but I didn't get nearly enough time to look around other than walking to and from interviews. I'm hoping that this time we can look all around more. Is there anything in this industry that you don't know? Mary laughed and bumped off my shoulder. The door to the car opened again. Liam and Orion came in, each holding 2 long rectangular boxes. Liam crouched over as he moved in our direction. Mary, let me trade seats with you. Elizabeth and John entered last, sitting at the opposite end of the car and talking quietly. The car slowly pulled away from the airport. When we all settled down, Liam was next to me while Mary was on the other side, between him and Orion. Both men were smiling. Orion brought something from Salt Lake for both of you. Liam handed me the 2 boxes, while Ryan handed Mary the 2 boxes he had brought in. The jet had brought Orion and Elizabeth from Westmound headquarters to Wyoming, where it had picked up Liam, Mary, myself, and Moo. Go ahead, open the box. Moo sat up on the seat and rested his head on my shoulder, staring intently at the box. I let out a squeal as I had a good idea of what was in the box, based on it being from Salt Lake and the shape. Sure enough, as I threw open the lid, there in the foam was a brand new Anderson archery recurve riser. Modern competition recurve bows consist of a riser that all the accessories attach to, such as the sight, stabilizer, and grip. The limbs snap into the top and bottom of the riser, giving the bow the majority of its length. The bowstring attaches to the limbs. The limbs are the part of the bow that bends and determines the draw weight of the bow. Limbs can be easily switched out when a bow is unstrung. The riser sitting in my lap was the newest model from Anderson Archery, a company owned by Westmound. It was a dark teal, the most beautiful color I had ever seen. The gentle curves and strategic cutouts and arcs were gorgeous. I ran my finger over the metal surface and lifted it in my bow hand, awed at how the wood grip felt to my hand. Mary squealed next to me. Awesome! My favorite color! She pulled out the same model riser as mine, but in a pale gold, soft and smooth like butter. I didn't know they came in these colors. Orion laughed. They're custom colors, just for you. Liam picked them out. Liam smiled. I might have picked up a few things during our Beckman shopping trips. These are the first 2 off the line. I hope you like them. Mary squealed, Thank you, thank you, thank you! I clutched my riser to my chest. Liam leaned back and threw one arm along the back of the seat, lightly grazing my far shoulder. I leaned into him. Thank you. He nodded his head to the boxes. Here, check out the limbs. I opened the bottom box. They were solid black except for Anderson on the front. The limbs were laminated of multiple materials that varied between models. From the side, the layers were visible, and in the middle was a teal layer that perfectly matched the riser. I gasped and looked at Mary. She looked at me and twisted her limb to show me that hers had a pale gold layer running down the length of the limbs. It matches! She squealed. At the far end of the car, Elizabeth and John looked at us. Elizabeth smiled, then went back to her conversation. My face felt hot as I turned to Liam. Did you do this just for us? Liam smiled and squeezed my shoulder with the hand resting on the back of my seat. Moo pressed his wet nose all over the limbs and riser. Once he determined that they weren't edible, he curled up at my side, grunting and groaning. Liam's hand rested on me, fingers gently cupping my shoulder. It was very distracting, and I lost my train of thought as I nestled between Moo and Liam. I felt deliciously warm, and my eyelids slid down, suddenly heavy. Orion leaned around Mary. Hey now, let's not forget my contribution to this project. We have talked about introducing a custom line of colors for special purchase or incentives to sponsored shooters. We need to make sure that the colors hold fast and there aren't any performance problems. Mary squealed again and threw her arms around Orion, the riser and limbs awkwardly wedged between them. Thank you, thank you, thank you! Orion dodged to the side to avoid a limb tip to the eye. You're welcome, kiddo. Mary sat back down in her seat. I wish I could shoot it now. This is going to be the longest 4 days ever. Orion unzipped his jacket and pulled out 2 matching bowstrings. You won't be able to shoot it, but I brought some strings so you can at least pull them back. Maybe share a picture online and get people excited about the new riser model? Mary snatched the strings out of his hand. You don't have to ask me twice. Orion reached into his messenger bag and passed her a bowstringer. I brought this because those limbs are perfect. I do not want you twisting them or taking out an eye using your foot to string the bow. That's the new Anderson bowstringer. Let me know what you think of it. I started to put the riser and limbs back into their boxes, running my finger over the slightly textured surface of the metal. I looked up to see Liam watching me and smiled again. I'm so excited. I can't wait to set it up. I'm glad I set everything up for Mary's and my training blogs. Orion leaned his head back to avoid a limb as Mary packed everything back in the boxes. I saw the mock-up you sent. It looks good. How will you structure it? I placed the boxes at my feet, and Moo flung his head over my lap with a deep sigh of contentment at regaining the space. Mary's blog will focus on elite competition and the more technical aspects, while mine is for the beginning competitive archer. Both of us will mix up equipment videos with form videos about what we are working on. Liam is going to help with the equipment videos. Orion's phone beeped and he pulled it out to poke at the screen. Sounds good. The rest of your setup was shipped directly to the center. Mary pulled out her phone to snap a picture of the new bow. She punched a few keys to post the picture online, and within seconds her phone was buzzing with replies. She settled into her seat and at the speed of light was tapping out messages. It was quiet in the car except the buzzing and chirping of Mary and Orion's phones. I looked out the window at the buildings flowing by. I had been living at the Westmound Center for competitive shooting sports in rural Wyoming since fall, but I already felt like the city was a foreign environment, the lights and cars closing in around me in the night. I nestled in closer to Liam in the dark car. He pulled his eyes away from his phone. You excited? Yes, of course. 4 whole days with Liam. Of course I was excited. The thought hit me that he meant the show, and I deflated a little. Mary was telling me all about it. She's super excited. Mary's always excited. I chuckled. Yes, she is. She keeps me entertained. You know, I'm still not clear on what we will be doing. Mary perked up and looked our way. Yeah, boss, what are we doing? She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a notebook and felt tip marker, carefully writing out OIT show assignments across the top in block letters. Liam looked at Orion, who chuckled. We don't really know what you guys are doing. Mary's eyebrows flew up. What? You don't know? Her pen hovered over the paper, yearning to organize our assignments into an orderly pattern. Jesse and Robbie really wanted to come to keep an eye on the industry, see the new products, and celebrate their anniversary. Since they were coming anyway, they decided to set up a table in the Westmound booth. We brought the box of literature, but beyond that, they weren't really going to do much. Mary leaned forward, her eyebrows scrunched up in confusion. Why did we come then? Liam shrugged. We had already ordered the badges, and there was space in the jet, and their room is in our suite, so why not? Orion flashed a big smile. Plus, you two are comic relief. Mary smiled at Orion. There was an openness around her eyes that was normally reserved for Tiger, an archer she insisted she did not have a crush on. This could be interesting. Orion laughed and ruffled her hair. Mary patted it back into place with a laugh, then turned to Liam with a smile. Does that mean that we can wander the floor all week? Liam chuckled. How about this? You can set up the table with the literature that Jess sent, and tomorrow at lunch we'll meet with you to see how things are going. Orion, when's our lunch break? Orion pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. 1 p.m. for an hour. We can grab lunch together. The car stopped in front of a hotel. We all started to gather up our boxes and bags as the door opened. Moo burst up from his seat, bonking me on the head with his formidable snout. I grabbed his leash, but not before he shoved Orion back into the seat and stomped on Mary's notebook, crumpling up her list. "Whoa, Moo, sit!" I said, pulling him back to my side. He wagged his tail, smacking me across the face, then looked back at me over his shoulder. His tongue hung out in a doggy smile. We were still working on basic obedience training, but it had been a long day and was getting late. After everyone filed out of the car, I exited with Moo, holding him behind me. Liam offered me his hand at the car door. Perhaps this could be our new pattern, holding his hand whenever I passed through a doorway. The entrance to the hotel had a large banner proclaiming, "Welcome Outdoor Industry Trade Shows attendees." It was more humid here. The air carried a deep chill that cut through my jacket straight to my bones. Moo whined and huddled close. Mary grabbed my arm and dragged me inside the hotel behind John and Elizabeth, while Liam and Orion unloaded the luggage onto a cart. I turned back to offer to help them, but Liam waved me to stay inside. John had left, and Elizabeth hung away from the counter while an older man in suspenders spoke to a female employee at the counter. The hotel was beautiful, with granite countertops and a well-appointed entrance. The hallways of the hotel all faced inward, with the center of the hotel open all the way to the top of the roof. The center had a fountain, large planters overflowing with palm trees, ferns, and flowers, and chairs spread in clusters, creating cozy nooks to talk in. Right now, it was empty except for a few people milling about inside a bar tucked into a corner off to the right. A cheerful lady at the counter responded to the demand. "Yes, sir, we heard the noise as well. We think it could have been the pipes or maybe even a boiler." She gave him a dazzling smile as the man and woman in the matching employee uniforms came through a doorway behind her, carrying flashlights. The old man pulled at the corner of his rather sizable walrus mustache. "I know my eyes aren't too great, but I swear I saw something fall from over there." He pointed a gnarled finger toward the far corner of the hotel, his knuckles swollen and knobbly. There was a dining facility on the ground level, though it was dark and had a heavy wall of trees around the edges that obscured the interior. "Don't worry, sir. Sometimes people hang jackets on the railings by their hotel door and they slip off. We'll check it out. Thank you so much for letting us know, and sleep well." The man turned and tipped his hat at us. His mustache twitched left and right a few times as if it were doing a quick dance step. He winked at us, then laughed. The blonde woman turned to the two employees and said something to them before they left. She turned back to us with a smile. An employee badge displaying the name Becky was visible. Elizabeth stepped up to the desk. "Hello, Becky. We're checking in. The reservation is under Westmound or Elizabeth Anderson. 2 S's in Anderson." Orion and Liam pushed the cart with our luggage piled high. Liam reached out for my boxes, but I pulled them to my chest on instinct. He gave a chuckle. "I'm not trying to steal them." "Right, sorry. I'm just so happy to have them. Thanks for bringing them." I handed Liam the boxes and stepped closer to the check-in counter. At the counter, Becky was gathering up a number of baggies from behind her. "I just need a credit card and driver's license. We have you in the deluxe suite, 3 bedrooms, 3 baths on the top floor. There was some things left for you at the counter." She read through the names on scraps of paper stapled to each outdoor industry trade show bag. Orion, Elizabeth, Mary, Di, Liam, and... She stepped forward to gather our bags as she pursed her mouth and stared quizzically at the last bag. "I'm sorry, I can't read this last one. It looks like it says, Moo?" Upon hearing his name, Moo barked once. She leaned over the high counter and laughed. "How did I miss him? Nice to meet you, Moo." She stepped back and reached under her desk. She cast her eyes around the group. "Would it be okay for me to give Moo a treat?" Moo barked once and jumped up to place his front paws on the top of the counter. He looked over the top and raised his nose to sniff the air, looking for the treat. I laughed. "That's fine." She offered him the treat, which he carefully took from her hand with his lips, then hopped down to lie on the floor and eat it. His mouth smacked and bits of treat exploded from his mouth as he chomped. His lips were squeezed shut and the corners of his mouth were pulled up in a smile. Once the treat was gone, he sniffed along the floor to pick up every crumb he missed. If you follow the hallway down past the bar, there is a door that leads out to the graveled pet area. There are doggy bags and a light. Please let us know if you need anything. Bring your key with you to get back in. I nodded my thanks to her and collected Moo's bag from the counter. Inside his bag was a name tag in a clear plastic pocket that hung from an elastic cord. His said Moo Westmound, which made me giggle. I checked my name, holding my breath. I avoided using my last name. Once the divorce was finalized, I would go back to my maiden name, but until then I had kept my married name, though I had always hated it. I pulled up the tag and flipped it over. To my surprise, it said Die Westmound. I leaned over to Liam. What's this about? His eyebrows rose, then he laughed. I didn't expect that. I know you didn't want to use your married name, so I left it off the email this afternoon. I guess they winged it. Hey, Mom, look. He turned the name tag to show her. She smiled. Welcome to the family, Di. I'd need to cross it off or hide it tomorrow. Otherwise, I would spend all week trying to explain who I was. Becky handed out room keys, plastic cards that slid into the locks, and individual plastic sheets with the number and Wi-Fi password written on the front. If you walk to the end of the counter and make a left, you'll see the elevators halfway down the hall. The restaurant's open at 5 a.m. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to call. We thanked her and gathered up our luggage to move to the elevator. I checked my watch. Let me run Moo outside before we head in for the night. I briskly walked past the bar and pushed on the door. Moo set right to work sniffing and rearranging himself to take care of business. I waved through the clear glass door at everyone where they were waiting for me. I urged Moo to hurry up, but instead he slowed down. He individually sniffed every piece of gravel before he finally finished up and came from the end of his leash back to my side. After I unlocked the door, we scooted inside. Laughter bubbled out of the bar as I passed. As I got back to the group, I checked the time on my phone. It wasn't horribly late, but the hotel was virtually empty beyond the people milling about inside the bar. Turning to Liam, Orion, and Mary, I remarked, I thought there would be more people here. Orion checked his watch. Not right now. The opening concert is going on for another hour or so. Normally we'd go, but with all the last-minute changes, we arrived too late. Plus, a lot of the attendees will arrive in the morning to save on hotel bills. Tomorrow night, this place will be packed. I nodded. It made sense. A buzz of excitement started in my stomach. I hadn't had much time this afternoon to contemplate how much fun this trip was going to be. Elizabeth pushed on the up button on the elevator. I was just thinking about all the adventures we were going to have when a shrill scream pierced the air. Chapter 2. Liam and Orion gave each other an almost imperceptible head nod before they took off running in opposite directions. Liam ran straight down to the adjacent corner of the hotel hallway, while Orion cut diagonally across the center of the hotel. I had a loose grip on Moo's leash, and when he took off after Liam, it slipped through my fingers. Moo! I took off at a run. Liam disappeared around a corner, hidden by the trees and the planters. Moo galloped a few feet behind, while I trailed at a considerable distance and much slower. My beautiful boots were slippery, not just on ice, but also on carpeting. I carefully rounded the corner and spotted Liam leaping over the railing around the restaurant. Orion was already inside, standing next to a hotel employee. At their feet was a man lying down on the tile floor. As I approached, Moo was already on his belly, trying to scoot under the railing. His front paws and chest were flat on the floor, while his rear end was high up in the air. I grabbed Moo's leash and pulled him to my side. A second employee appeared and used a walkie-talkie to request that someone call 911. Now that I was closer, I could see the pool of blood surrounding the man's head. His face was turned away from me, and the back of his head was covered in blood. I thought of another head covered in blood that I had found in the dead of night at the Westmound Center a few months ago and reached out to Moo. I pulled him against my side, feeling the weight of him on me as he leaned against me. His body heat seeped through my pants and warmed me from the chill I had gotten when I saw the man on the ground. Just like the last time, Liam was suddenly at my side, holding my arm. "Are you okay? Want to sit down?" I turned and gave him an awkward smile. "I feel fine, thank you. I guess after a few times you get used to it." Orion moved to join us, hopping over the railing. Footsteps came trotting up behind us. "Jiminy Christmas!" Mary said. I turned at the sound of her voice. Her face was white, and her eyes locked onto the dead man on the ground. Orion reached over and caught her as she swayed. "Hey there, kiddo. Look at me." She did, and her pale face flushed red. She recovered far faster than I had the first time I had seen a dead body. Her white teeth flashed as she stared up into his face. "Thanks, Orion. I was just so surprised and upset." He smiled back at her and patted her back. A noise behind me pulled my attention back around. A group of people had emerged from the bar, many carrying pint glasses with amber liquid or martini glasses. A small, beautiful blonde lady led the group. "What's going on? We heard a scream." Her eyes were round and shockingly blue, even from a dozen yards away. She blinked at us a few times, staring at us, but not looking around. The rest of the group trailing along behind her swung their head around, looking up and back, searching for the source of the scream. The male employee from the hotel stepped around the body and approached the group from the other side of the railing. A line of planters with tall, skinny plants was blocking the group's view of the employee and the body on the ground. The man raised his voice to be heard through the plants. "Go back to the bar. Everything is under control." The group surged forward to the end of the planter so they could see around. The blonde clapped her hands over her mouth with her head dipped to see the body on the floor. A strangled cry broke through her hands. "It's Kenny! Why is he here? What happened?" A bald man with muscles visibly straining the sleeves of his polo shirt put an arm around her shoulder. He murmured at the rest of the group, "It's Cash!" A murmur of shock rose from the group. People alternately leaned in to see or stepped back in shock. The bald man turned back to the employee. "This is his wife. Do something. Did you try to help him?" The blonde buried her face in the bald man's shirt, her shoulders and body heaving as she screamed and sobbed, a martini still held in one hand. Red liquid sloshed out of the glass and onto the bald man's shirt. The male employee softly replied, "I'm sorry, there is nothing that can be done. The police are on their way." He urged people to step back. I turned to my group. Mary had her phone casually in front of her, but I could see that she was snapping pictures. I caught her eye and she slipped it into her pocket. "We left Elizabeth with the luggage." She grabbed my arm and dragged me back to the elevator, with Orion and Liam following. I gave one last look over my shoulder at the group huddled by the restaurant. The pretty blonde, sobbing into the bald man's chest. A few women. One especially tall woman who towered over the group. And a variety of men from young 20s to 50s or 60s in every kind of plaid shirt I could imagine. They appeared to be the people I had spotted earlier in the bar. If it wasn't such a busy week, it would be tempting to poke around and learn more about them. Elizabeth was stranded with our luggage in front of the elevator. As we approached, she tapped her foot and pressed the call button. "It's been a long day." Liam grabbed her briefcase as she reached down to grab it. "Sorry, Mom. We shouldn't have run off like that. A guy died over there." The doors to the elevator opened with a ding. Elizabeth turned to Liam in surprise as we shuffled in with the bags and the luggage cart. She pressed the top button. "Oh, the poor man. Heart attack?" Orion snorted. "Not unless he had it on the way down." Elizabeth looked between him and Liam. Liam clarified. "It looks like he fell onto the tile floor from pretty high up." She shook her head. "That's sad. I didn't realize. Do you boys need to help?" We turned to the back of the elevator, which was all glass, and allowed an unobstructed view of the scene. Someone had covered the body with a sheet. Mary was pressed to the back glass, taking pictures with her phone again. Moo shoved his nose into her hand, knocking the phone to the ground. We lurched to a stop. Liam pushed the cart out into the open-air hallway. They have it under control. The hallway ran between the solid half wall that reached my eye level and the long row of rooms. I walked over, stood on the tip of my toes, and could barely see over the top. Mary hopped up and down next to me. Can you see anything? Not really. I tipped my head one way and tried to catch a glimpse of the floor, but all I could see was the endless rows of hallways of the lower floors. Girls! Elizabeth called to us in a low voice. She was propping open a door near the corner. Our suite was roughly over the front desk and opposite corner from the death scene. Mary and I pushed away from the wall and briskly walked to the room. Thank you, Elizabeth. I looked around the room. I had never been in a suite. There was a small open room, like a den with chairs, a table, a TV, and a couch. I let Moo off his leash and he bounded through an open door into a bedroom. The boys are staying there. I'm next to them here, and girls, you're over there. Each room has their own bathroom. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to bed. We'll need to be ready to leave at 7 a.m. She opened the door to her room and closed it behind her. Moo came out of the boys' bedroom, where a twin-sized bed was visible, and trotted over to our door as I opened it. He circled the room, then hopped up in the middle of the huge king-size bed and started clawing the bedspread until it was a rumpled pile, then flopped down on it. A knock on the bedroom door heralded Liam's arrival. Here's your luggage. Oh, good. Moo has a place to sleep. I turned with a smile. Mary and I shouldn't take the king bed. We can trade with you and Orion. He snorted as he pushed the last bag into the room. Nice try. See you in the morning. And he pulled the door shut behind him. Mary was already in the bathroom, the faucet running. I stepped over to the large window and looked out with a yawn. Below, a police car with red and blue lights flashing pulled into the parking lot. I pulled the curtain shut and yawned again as I dragged my luggage over to the side of the bed closer to the window and started laying out clothing. First, a quick and easy outfit so I could rush Moo outside first thing in the morning, as I had zero intentions of a Great Dane accident occurring during this trip. Then I pulled out my outfit for tomorrow. Something that was professional but stylish, easy to walk and sit in, layers for the inevitable point in the day when I'm freezing, and I didn't mind looking cute. With everything ready to go in the morning, I turned to the boxes with my riser and limbs. I pulled out the limbs and found the one marked bottom. I slid it into the riser, the dovetail set into the matching notch until it snapped into place, and did the same with the top limb. I got out the bowstring and slid it into place. The bathroom door opened behind me. Here, let me get you the bowstringer. Mary brought it over to me and started assembling her bow. I uncoiled the bowstringer, then used it to pull the limbs back so the string would securely lie in the groove on each limb tip. Removing the stringer, I passed it to Mary while I checked that everything was seated correctly. I drew back the bowstring to the corner of my chin. Without the finger tab for protection, the string pulled uncomfortably into the pads of my fingers. I slowly let down, removing my hand from the corner of my mouth to bring the draw hand slowly back to the bow. I would never dry fire a bow. Shoot it without an arrow. It could damage the limbs, not to mention the horrible noise it would make and the welt I would get on my bow arm. Many a bow had been destroyed by a careless archer who shot it on instinct, forgetting there was no arrow. I watched Mary pull back her bow and let it down. These limbs are so smooth. I nodded agreement. As you draw a bow, the draw weight increases. A smooth set of limbs can make all the difference. Mary looked down the bowstring from one limb tip, then the other, closing one eye. Then she centered the bowstring in the center of the riser. Looks good. Let me check yours. She did the same to mine. Good. We'll need limb liners to make sure, but they look pretty darn perfect. I knew she was checking our bows for something, but wasn't totally sure what. She had been a high-level archer for years, while I was just returning to the sport. We carefully set our bows against the wall, the bowstring parallel to the floor, then I hurried to the bathroom to get ready for bed. Even the excitement of new equipment couldn't keep me up much longer. When I came out of the bathroom, in fluffy flannel pajamas, with a freshly washed face and minty teeth, Mary was cajoling Moo to get off the bed. "Please, Moo, off!" She dragged out the words. I chuckled. "Mary, you're in charge. Don't beg him. Tell him." "Oh." She stood up, pointed at the floor. "Off!" He groaned, got up, and hopped off the bed. We straightened out the comforter and crawled in, and Mary turned off the last light on her side of the bed. In the darkness, the bed sagged as Moo crawled into the space between us and settled in. Despite my weariness, I struggled to relax. I fluffed a pillow, switched from the left to the right side, then tucked the covers over my shoulder when a thought occurred to me. "Did you set an alarm?" Mary gasped. Then her sleepy voice came through the darkness. "What? Oh, it's set." "Did I wake you already?" It couldn't have been more than a minute or two since she turned off the lights. "It's okay." The bed moved as she adjusted, but the covers didn't shift with Moo weighing it down. His slow, deep breathing was relaxing. "Just one last question. What's the OIT show like?" "It's like the Westmound Summit, but bigger." Chapter 3. Describing the outdoor industry trade show as the Westmound Summit, but bigger, was like describing a dinosaur as a lizard, but bigger. While technically an accurate statement, it did nothing to prepare me for the sheer immensity of the situation. Booths stretched across the room with rows and aisles between them all the way across the convention hall. These are all archery and gun people? I stared in awe as I was jostled by people pushing past us on the trek deeper onto the trade room. I stared in awe as I was jostled by people pushing past us on the trek deeper onto the trade show floor. Mary grabbed my arm and dragged Moo and me out of the flow of people pushing through the entrance. "We'll get run over standing like that." There are archery and firearm companies, along with anyone involved in hunting or competitive shooting. So, camouflage companies, off-road vehicle, optics like binoculars and spotting scopes. I can't believe they fill this entire place. It's enormous. Mary dug around in her OIT show bag and pulled out a map. Not just this exhibit hall, but a few more. This is the main hall with all the biggest companies. "Found Westmound. Follow me." We had arrived a few minutes after the show opened because of a breakfast meeting that had run late between Westmound and Beckman's. Mary, Moo, and I had breakfast burritos in the car while playing with all the buttons and talking with Jack in the front seat. When we arrived, everyone in the car had scattered. They were late for various meetings. Moo wore the backpack I had given him for Christmas with his OIT show staff t-shirt pinned to it. He had a collapsible water bowl, doggy bags, and a toy stored in the pockets. I had tried to put treats in there too, but after 5 minutes of him circling, lips extended, trying to reach his backpack and the goodies within, I removed the treats and stuck them in my own bag. We trotted to catch up with Mary as her shorter legs moved at a brisk pace ahead of us. I kept my eyes in the back of her head with her smooth black bob swinging left and right in time to her pace. My eyes kept slipping to the left to look at the vendors we passed. A camouflage vendor with everything from hunting gear to lingerie, compound bows of every variety, and up ahead, towering over the surrounding structures and almost touching the ceiling, was what appeared to be a solid white creature. It stood on 2 thick legs while the arms were raised on either side of its head. The white foam surface was formed to resemble thick fur. Its mouth was open to reveal teeth, and red eyes stared ahead. On the end of its fingers were black claws. It was humanoid, but definitely not human, like the abominable snowman. As we approached the white creature, Mary swung left to turn down the aisle. The crowds had winnowed down to a scattering of people, most having turned down earlier aisles. Moo stopped dead and pulled back on the leash. His tail was tucked between his legs, and his head was hung low. "What's wrong, Moo?" I followed his eyes to the white creature towering overhead. Surrounding it were foam 3D animals, intended to be shot by archers in competitive tournaments. There were deer, elk, bear, and every animal you could imagine from this planet, including long-extinct dinosaurs or mythical creatures. "I don't think your dog likes karma," a man's voice interrupted my ogling. He approached from the booth. "Hi, I'm Mike, tournament director of the Red Bluff Safari, the largest and most successful 3D tournament in the world. And this is Karma the Yeti." He gestured to the white creature, then extended his hand in greeting. I tried to step forward, but Moo doubled down his efforts to back away from Karma. Mike closed the distance to shake my hand, then turned to Mary. "You've shot our tournament before, right?" Mary smiled. "Yes, I came with my dad a few years ago and wrote an article. We had a great time." "We gonna get you back this year? You can even bring the dog." He held out a hand in Moo's direction, offering it to him to sniff, but Moo was focused on Karma. The hair on his scruff stood straight on end. Mary stepped over to Moo and gave him a scratch behind the ears. "Maybe. We'll see." She turned to me. "The Red Bluff Safari is a great shoot. It's in Northern California, north of Sacramento. Karma is a one-of-a-kind target. How'd you get her in here?" Mike sucked air through his teeth and shook his head. "The old model was worn out, so the manufacturers brought her here to the show. Then we'll put her on a flatbed and take her out to California. I have to tell you, though, getting her set up in here was an ordeal. Taking her down will be a hope and a prayer." Mary checked her watch. "Good to see you, Mike, but we're late. See you later." She grabbed my arm and steered a wide path around Karma as we waved goodbye. We continued down the aisle until there was a break for people to move across the floor perpendicularly to the aisle. We looked both ways and jetted across the walkway. There was the Westmound booth, and across the aisle was Anderson Archery. Both companies took up the space from one aisle to the next, and from the walkway to the far wall. Looking through the displays, I could see more Westmound companies on the far side. "Wow, is this whole area just companies owned by Westmound?" Mary stood on tiptoe. "Pretty much. There she is." I tried to follow Mary as she bobbed and weaved her way through the booth. Moo wanted to sniff everything as we proceeded to catch up with Mary, who was hugging an older blonde lady. "So good to see you, Mary. And you must be Di. I'm Connie." She stepped away from Mary towards me with her arms outstretched. "Connie, thrilled to meet you." I wrapped her in a hug. Connie was Elizabeth's executive assistant, and her husband worked for Anderson Archery. They had flown in a day or two early and had their own room and car. I had emailed and spoken to her many times. I broke apart from the hug. "I can't believe we have never met in person." "I know. Let me show you your table. I already put out the literature Jess sent. Poor thing. Are she and Robbie feeling any better?" She wove her way to a corner of the Westmound booth where a table stood diagonally in a corner, the aisle on one side and the pathway on the other. I shook my head when I caught up. "I don't think so. I haven't heard from Jess today. Hopefully they're sleeping it off. This is our table?" She nodded. "Do you need bottled water? Fruit? Granola bars? We have everything you could need in the meeting rooms." She hooked a thumb over her shoulder toward the interior of the booth. There were 3 doors and a wall that ran along the back of the booth. "These booths have meeting rooms? This is a far cry from what I expected." "Nicer than my first apartment. If you're all set, I'm going to catch up with Elizabeth." Mary pulled one of the chairs out from behind the table and sat. "We're good. Thanks, Connie." I tried to settle Moo in behind the table, then pulled a chair to sit down. "So what do we do now?" By the time lunch rolled around a few hours later, I knew exactly what we were going to do. We were going to be bored out of our minds. People mostly rushed past our tables. The booth around us were packed with people, but everyone was busy doing business. The cell reception in the exhibit hall was non-existent. When Liam and Orion came to the table, I could have cried with relief. Liam held aloft a white paper bag. "Food's here." We scrambled to grab our stuff and follow Liam and Orion as they ducked into a room to pass a bag to Elizabeth and Connie, then opened another door for us. The room had a few chairs and thin walls made from a white material. Orion started unpacking his bag of food. Jack picked up some salads and sandwiches for us. Moo sniffed at the table and lunged for a roast beef sandwich, but Liam quickly lifted it out of Moo's reach. "No, lie down." Moo squinted at Liam, then in a huff circled 3 times clockwise, then once counterclockwise, and flopped down. I reached over and grabbed the roast beef sandwich from Liam's raised hand. "Can I have this?" Liam nodded and continued to pull out condiments, napkins, and an assortment of sandwiches from his bag. Orion pulled out 4 different salads. Mary snatched a salad and a sandwich. "Think you got enough food?" Orion smiled at her while sliding over plastic utensils. "Gotta keep everyone happy. How was your morning? Talk to many people?" I leaned back in my seat, smiling as I bit into my sandwich. Mary giggled and pulled a notebook out of her messenger bag and flipped to a tally sheet we had kept. "Let me tell you about our morning. 1 person signed up for the mailing list that Jess is starting. We pointed 32 people to the bathroom. 25 people commented, 'What a big dog,' versus 16 that asked if he had a saddle. And lastly, 4 people hit on die." I gasped, then coughed on my mouthful of roast beef sandwich. I covered my mouth, but lost my grip on the sandwich, bits of roast beef and fixings falling across the table. Finally, I caught my breath. "We weren't tracking who hit on me." "You weren't, but I was." Orion laughed. "How many hit on Mary?" She looked at him, a blush creeping up her neck. "No one hit on me." She cast her eyes down at her salad, which she had speared with intensity. Turnaround was fair play. "You were hit on," I said. "Ew. That guy who asked if I would walk on his back was gross." I shook my head. That was gross. But I meant the young blonde guy who came to the table after we took Moo outside. He said he runs the youth archery program at his shop, and they use videos of you shooting to help his students develop better form. He definitely has eyes for you. The blush burst across her cheeks and she smiled. "Oh yeah, him." Liam grabbed a napkin and wiped up the debris from my sandwich. Then he passed me a clean napkin. "We'll move your table. We didn't bring you to the show to tell people where the bathrooms are, or get hit on." Moo moaned on the ground, licking his lips. I got up and took off his backpack, unloaded his collapsible water bowl, and filled it with bottled water off the table. Then I dug into my bag and got out a few treats. Once he was settled in, I continued on my sandwich. "How was your morning? Did you buy new companies or move a lot of units or whatever it is you guys are doing?" Orion grabbed a few sodas from the cooler in the corner and brought them back to the table. "Don't you work with Liam? Shouldn't you know his job by now?" "Based on what I see at the center, Liam's job is to play around with guns all day." Orion snorted, covered his mouth, and started coughing. "Dang, don't say stuff like that when I'm trying to take a drink." Liam smiled at me. "Hardy har har, I do more than play around with guns all day." "But seriously, I know that both of you, along with Elizabeth, oversee all the Westmound companies or something like that. So what exactly do you do at this trade show?" Liam and Orion exchanged a look. They must have communicated something because they both turned back to me and Orion fell into the easy tone of a story he had told a million times. After Mr. Westmound and Mr. Anderson passed a decade ago, Elizabeth Anderson formed a new company, Westmound Anderson Industries, which owns Westmound, Anderson, and all the other companies such as Night Accessories, Max Sights, Quaker Stabilizers, etc. "Wait, I thought Westmound owned all the other companies." Orion shook his head. "That is a very common misconception. Technically, all the companies are owned by the parent company, Westmound Anderson Industries, but no one really knows or cares except our accountants. It's too confusing to bother being picky about. The important part is that people know that Elizabeth Anderson is in charge, regardless of the name on the business card." I nodded my head. "We all say Westmound, but really you both work for Westmound Anderson Industries." Liam grabbed a second water bottle and twisted off the top. "You got it." "Great, but that doesn't answer the original question." Orion sat up in his chair. "Oh, that's right. I knew I was headed somewhere. Since we oversee all the companies, our job is a bit different here. We sit in on meetings with major distributors, like the Beckman meeting this morning, to give it a bit more weight. We will walk the floor to see what products are selling, what the competitors are doing, and general industry trends. We are also meeting with some companies that are looking to be bought out by us. Mary unwrapped a sandwich. People want to be bought out? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of reasons people want to sell their company. They want to retire, they have plateaued and need more capital to expand, they want the money, they're about to go under. Liam pushed his chair away from the table and relaxed back into the seat. Speaking of distributors, we need to talk to you about tonight. Orion looked over at Liam. Is tonight the game? Liam nodded. Connie reminded me. He turned to us. We usually get a box at the local game and invite our biggest distributors as a thank you for buying our products and as a casual way for them to discuss what they want to see from us. And Moo can't come. Moo jerked his head up to stare at Liam. Moo whined softly, then lowered his head and batted his eyes up at Liam, but Liam was unmoved by Moo's guilt attempts. Liam reached over to Moo and scratched his ears. Sorry, buddy. You have a couple of options. You're both invited to the game, and Jack offered to keep Moo in the car with him. Another is that Jack can drop us off at the game, then pick you up food from wherever you want and bring it to the hotel. Or, Mary jumped in. We'll stay at the hotel and get Indian food from that place Jack told us about this morning. Then she looked at me and cleared her throat. I mean, that's my vote, but only if Di agrees. I smiled back at her. That sounds great. What does the rest of the day look like for you guys? Liam rolled his eyes. Meetings. 1,000,000 meetings. Orion laughed. It's not so bad. After today, things lighten up a bit. The first day is always a crunch, as everyone wants to get all the important stuff out of the way. I gathered up our trash. Yeah, it sure seemed that everyone that raced past our table was off somewhere important. Liam got up from his seat and placed his hand on my shoulder. Why don't we give it until the end of the day, and if the table still doesn't have much activity, then we can consider mixing it up. I flopped onto the couch in our suite while Moo chomped on his dinner in the kitchenette. It had been a long day. What do you want to order from the Indian place? Mary peeked at me over a lowered newspaper that Jack had given her as she exited the car this evening. Huh? Oh, food. Can we get a little of everything? She disappeared behind the newspaper. I searched through the menu to find something that would work and copied our order onto a sheet of paper. Liam, Orion, and Elizabeth were in their rooms getting ready for the game tonight. I checked my phone. Several emails and messages had come through. Minx and Tiger sent a few texts as they were in the process of moving to the Westmound Center as on-site athletes. Minx wanted to know what the laundry facilities were like, so I typed up a reply explaining what was there and that she would definitely want to bring her own laundry basket. Tiger, on the other hand, wanted to know what the local singles scene was in town. I chuckled and suggested that he contact some of the single firearm instructors at the center. I never left the center in the evenings. I had everything I needed at the center already. Liam came into the room. He had changed clothing for the evening, adding a few layers. He came over and sat next to me. Are you sure that you want to stay here? Moo came over to Liam. Yes, I'm really excited to stay in after a long day. Here's our order. I handed him the paper, our fingers brushing. A warmth flowed over me as I looked at him and we smiled. We're good, Mary said as she folded up the newspaper and pulled out the laptop from her bag and fired it up. I have some work to do. Mary had told me on the plane ride over that she didn't have any homework this trip since the university semester had just started. What was she up to? She started typing and clicking away at her computer, dismissing me completely. I turned to Liam, who was already watching me. Moo shoved his snout into my eyes. I stared at Liam, startling me and making Liam laugh. Was the afternoon at the center table better? Liam pulled on Moo's collar to get him out of my face and scratched behind his ears. I ran a finger under my eye, hoping to remove any smeared makeup. Not really. The only people that talked to us were people that were looking for someone in the Westmound booth. Liam's mouth formed a grim line. That's not good. Connie and Mom are always saying that there is never enough time at the OIT show to see everything. Want me to see if there's anything else that you and Mary can do? That would be great. We can sit at the table all week, but I'm not sure we're doing much to contribute. A knock on the door brought Liam to his feet to open it. John stepped into the room. A few seconds later, Elizabeth exited her room. John's face lit up when he saw her. His delight was far beyond a professional interest only. Orion exited the bedroom, and they gathered their stuff to head out. Liam checked over the dinner order I had given him. I'll give this to Jack, and he'll bring the food back here. I imagine it'll take him at least an hour. Do you want him to bring the food to the room? Nah, he doesn't need to come all the way up here. We'll go hang out in the lobby with Moo. If you need anything, give me a call. After the door shut behind them, I tried to get Mary's attention. Why do you think we're sharing a car with John? She dragged her eyes off the computer screen to stare at me. Huh? Why are Beckman's and Westmound sharing a car this week? Beckman's has like 1 million stores, and we flew here in a private jet. I'm sure both companies could afford their own car. So why are we sharing one car? Mary waved a hand at me. If you want to be Veronica Mars, then you need to focus on the real mystery. I patted the couch next to me, and Moo hopped up and set to cleaning a paw. Which is? Mary rolled her eyes. You know that I want to investigate the guy we found last night. I laughed. She was right. I knew we were going to investigate eventually, but I could tease Mary a bit more. Oh, him! I totally forgot about him. I'm not sure I even want to investigate. Mary's face fell. Oh. No, I'm kidding, Mary. Nothing would make me happier than to investigate with you. She squinted at me. You sure? I kicked my feet up on the coffee table in front of the couch and slid down with my hands behind my head. Totally. Have you given any thought to how we'll solve the murder? If it even is a murder. Mary grabbed the newspaper off the table and shook it at me. It was a murder. The newspaper said that there was an ongoing investigation, and I have a plan. Logic. Logic? Yes, logic. If we learn everything there is to know about him, then we can figure out who would want to kill him. Once we eliminate everyone with an alibi, then we have the killer. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So once you eliminate the impossible, then whatever is left, no matter how improbable, gives us the killer? I quipped. Yeah, that's great. Did you make that up just now? No, I laughed. I paraphrased Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. That's perfect. We'll be Sherlock Holmes and his trusty sidekick, Watson. She gestured at me when she said Watson. If I'm the sidekick, then you better pull together the plan, Sherlock. Mary leaned back in her chair and tapped a pen on her lip with one hand while flipping through her notebook with the other. Here's what I got from the newspaper. His name was Kenny, something or other, but he went by Cash. He made his money from a check cashing business his dad left him. He sold it a few years ago and started a hunting show and business called Hunting with Cash. Catchy name. Moo pawed at me, and I reached over to give him a scratch on his back. Yeah, he had all kinds of catchy mottos that he put on t-shirts and decals. The last season of his show just finished a few weeks ago, and they said it was really taking off. And the police are treating his death as a homicide. He is survived by his wife, Hannah something or other. That's all I got. She scratched a few notes onto her notepad. Something or other. What a beautiful last name. Is it Dutch? Mary rolled her eyes and I continued. You're the archery expert. Tell me about hunting shows. How do they work? How do you get a show? Moo whined, pawed at my leg, and stared at me again. Mary shrugged. Honestly, I don't know much. My parents never really watched any of those shows. Said they were 30 minutes of commercials. I know only the absolute basics. There are hunting channels and hunting shows are sponsored. Hey, does Moo need to go outside? Moo leapt from the couch and pranced around the room. I gasped. You're right. I totally forgot. I grabbed my jacket, my wallet, and his leash. Want to hang in the lobby afterwards while we wait for the food to arrive? I snapped the leash onto Moo's collar as he waited at the door, dancing back and forth on his feet, then staring at me, waiting for me to open the door. Mary gathered up her jacket and stuffed everything into her messenger bag and threw it over her head. Just in case we find any clues, Watson. I stepped into the hallway. I told Moo to heel and held him close to my side. Liam and I were working hard to train Moo. He was a huge dog, but still young. He needed to learn manners. This morning, we had been in a rush, but stepping into the glass elevator, I looked around. Look at all the police tape. Not only was the restaurant we had found cash in taped off, but a corner on each floor above it had police tape. Mary pushed her face against the glass. They must not know what floor he fell from yet. They have every floor closed off right above where they found him. Did you take pictures last night? The elevator came to a halt and the doors opened. Yes, I did, she gasped and turned to me. What if the murderer returned to the scene of the crime? We stepped onto the ground floor and headed toward the dog area past the bar. I thought that was just arsonists. Mary shrugged. I figured it couldn't hurt to have a record of some of the people that were at the hotel when it happened. Plus, maybe there's something we missed in all the excitement. I removed the blurry ones. I didn't get any of Cash. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Honestly, a good thing. Maybe there was something for us to learn, but I don't feel comfortable having pictures of a dead person. I nodded my agreement. Investigating a murder is one thing, but keeping pictures of the body is ghoulish. We'll leave the forensics to the cops. We have inside archery knowledge on our side. As we approached the bar, the voices inside drew our attention. The bar was hopping. People were clustered around tall tables, grabbing drinks and laughing loudly. Right outside were stuffed chairs with little tables next to them. Mary flopped into a chair and dropped her bag at her side. Do you mind if I wait here? I'll watch the lobby and maybe flag down someone that can answer some questions about hunting shows. Moo and I walked to the door and pushed it out into the cold winter air. The dog area had a gate, and once inside, I let Moo off his leash since he was used to doing his business free range. I checked my phone and had a message from Liam saying that the food should be here soon and wishing us a nice evening. Once Moo was finished and I had responsibly cleaned up, I snapped the leash back onto his collar. Fumbling with the keycard entrance, I stepped back into the warmth, blowing warm air onto my hands. I really needed to get mittens. Mary was talking to a brunette gal, and as I approached, her southern accent became clear. The back of her shirt said OIT staff. Mary caught my eye and waved me to hurry up. Di, get over here. I want you to meet Sarah. We exchanged handshakes, and I motioned to the chair. Want to sit with us? She hesitated and checked her watch. I really think I should be getting up to the room. She didn't make any motion to leave. It'll just be a minute. In fact, let me get you a drink. I pulled out my wallet and she shook her head. No drink, but I can sit for a minute. Just a minute, though. If I stay longer, kick me out. I've got so much work to do. We sat and I scooted my chair around a bit to get a better view of Sarah opposite me. Mary pulled her bag into her lap and rummaged around. Work to do? Aren't you done for the day? Sarah sighed. No, I am so behind. We brought in some writers to do up the articles in the show, like what you did. They are super talented people that write for the website, but they are not used to the fast turnaround that we need for this event. Say, are you guys busy? We are here to help with Westmound, but what's up? We really need some content. I'll pay you to write a couple of articles on new Westmound products. Ask your boss. It's a win-win. We'll mention it. Mary exchanged a look with me and I nodded back. We have some questions about hunting shows. Sarah rolled her eyes and rubbed her temples. Ugh, them. Are they bothering you? Mary's eyebrows rose. No, why? In general, the hunting shows get a media pass and they use the OIT show to try and get sponsors, which isn't technically allowed. It is hard to police because sponsors like to bring the hunting personalities to the show so pro shop buyers can meet them and get influenced by their favorite TV hunters into buying the sponsors' products. It is a bit of a catch-22. They're not supposed to solicit sponsors at the OIT show, only support their existing sponsors. But the best place to get sponsors is at the OIT show. We double-check that everyone buying a media badge does have a website, TV show, or something, then send out information to all the attendants telling them not to try to sell products unless they have a booth. What a strange industry. I leaned in to ask a question. Why do they need sponsors? Don't the networks give them a budget when they pick up the show? Is it just for additional money? Sarah turned to face me and shook her head. Hunting networks are totally different than the rest of the TV industry. They sell their time slots to hunting shows. Hunting shows pay for the time slot using money from the sponsors. Or, if they don't have enough sponsors, they pay for it themselves. So anyone can have a show? Sarah laughed. Maybe. I'm not sure on all the details. They pitch the shows to the network, and if the network likes the shows, then they might give them a couple of time slots and prices. Each network is a bit different. I have no idea what they are looking for. We have a couple of networks here. They have booths on the south side of the secondary pavilion. She raised her eyebrows at me, then turned to Mary. I could set up things for you to get some interviews. It sure would be a great article to talk about how hunting shows are set up. Mary laughed. Oh, I like that idea. We'll see what we can do. Sarah stood up. I really wish I could stay longer and chat, but I better go. Get a hold of me any time if you can do that article. We waved goodbye. Mary pulled out her notebook and scratched a few notes. Time slots, sponsors, networks, rivals. What does that mean? I leaned over to scratch Moo's shoulder. He flopped onto his back, exposing his pink tummy. Motives, suspects, things to investigate. She gave a wave of her hand. I need to see what network his show was on and what time slot. What if he bumped another show? What if he stole someone's sponsors? You're really excited about this. I am. There's so much to learn and so many options. It's different than what we've done before. A man's voice from the bar behind us called out, Hey, Princess Di! Hey, Bloody Mary! With a groan at the nickname I hated, I turned around to see Logan walking over to us. He towered overhead and had the muscle to make him an impressive sight. I couldn't help but smile at his boy-next-door good looks. Hey, Logan! He had 3 drinks held between his 2 hands. The greeting is from Minx. He put the 3 glasses down on the tiny table. Come here. This is from me. He gave us each a hug, lifting me off my feet easily. When he hugged Mary, who was shorter than me, she looked like a doll flopping in his arms, and he spun her around once. I brought you both a drink. He grabbed one of the pint glasses and sat down. He took a long draw of the amber liquid. I hope you like it. I asked the bartender for something that 2 classy ladies would enjoy. It's a hard cider. He gave us a wink and a smile. On someone else, that might be sleazy, but he had an innocence that made me laugh instead. Mary and I picked up our drinks and lifted them. Cheers! The liquid had a bite of a tart apple, but was smooth going down. The muscles in my neck, which I hadn't realized were tight, loosened. Maybe it was the act of having a casual drink with friends, but already I felt more relaxed, holding the glass in my hand as we sat in silence. It felt companionable rather than awkward. Logan had an Anderson archery shirt on. Last time I had seen him was at the Westmound Center, trying to track down some money. New sponsors? I pointed at his shirt. Yes, and better. New job. I'm the pro staff coordinator at Anderson. I've been there 3 days. He beamed. What a first week, I laughed. He took another sip of his cider. Tell me about it. This job is the bomb. Mary took a sip of her drink and wriggled her nose. Tangy, but I like it. Thank you, Logan. What are you doing at the trade show? Signing new athletes? No, most of the pro staff contracts for the season have been signed for a while. I spent the first half of the week sending out the new season's equipment to some shooters. In fact, I sent a few packages to both of you. At the show, I'm here as an extra body to show the product line to buyers. Will you handle the hunting pro staff too? And sending their equipment? Mary took another drink from her rapidly disappearing cider. Yes, I will get them the equipment, but no, I don't do the money part. That's the marketing peeps. But hopefully this spring I'll be able to start making some decisions. I extended a leg and rotated my foot. I hadn't realized how stiff I was from sitting in a folding chair all day. What happens this spring? He drained the rest of his drink, then set the glass on the table. I'll be hitting not only the 3D circuit, but the target tournaments as well. In fact, now that I live in Salt Lake, it's a quick drive over to the center to train with you guys. You'll teach me everything I need to know to shoot targets, right? I was ready to tease him a little. If you ask Minx... I was cut off mid-sentence by a man calling out Logan's name. Turning, I saw Cold, an archery video journalist I had met last month and instantly disliked. He was as tall as ever, but more gaunt. His cheeks clung tightly to his bones, and his sleeves no longer strained around his biceps. He looked at Logan, but didn't acknowledge or even look at Mary and me. Logan, come back in here. I'm going to introduce you to Moose. He's a very important dude in the industry, someone you really need to know. Logan hesitated, then smiled broadly. Have you met Mary and Di? They work at... Yeah, we've met. Hey, Logan, let's go. It appeared his hey was directed at us as he raised a hand in our general direction, though he didn't bother to make eye contact. Logan looked at us, then back at Cold with a smile. Sure. I'll be in there in a second. Cold disappeared back into the bar, and Logan turned to us. What was that about? Mary's lips were pursed, and she crossed her arms. Such a jerk. I chuckled. I neither liked nor trusted Cold. He doesn't like us, which is fair because we aren't his biggest fans either. Though it was an accurate statement, it didn't fully sum up the feeling of unease I felt around him. Be careful around him. He set off my internal alarms. There was a harshness to him that scared me, but that was nothing I could prove. Inside the bar, laughter erupted. Cold stood inside, beaming, while men around him guffawed and slapped him on the back. Everyone else seemed to love the guy. I finished off my cider and looked back at Logan. Be careful, that's all. Got it. He reached out a hand for my empty glass and took Mary's as well. If you get a chance, stop by the Anderson booth. I'll give you the official tour of the product line. He went into the bar and dropped the glasses on a tray, then joined Cold, another tall man, and a group of shorter guys. They probably weren't that short, but they were all at least a head shorter than Logan. Handshakes were passed around, and eager voices carried out of the bar. It was an all-boys club. If Liam was here, it wouldn't matter. He never acted like there were more important people to rush off to. As I looked toward the lobby, the front doors pushed open, and Jack came in carrying several bags. Food's here! Moo leapt to his feet as I stood and raced over. My stomach was growling as I approached Jack and thanked him. Mary caught up to me and grabbed a bag of food from Jack. You're the best. I'm starving. Sitting on the couch in our suite, I could barely move. Empty containers of Indian food were scattered on the coffee table. I grabbed the last corner of naan, swiped it through the sauce, and savored it. I can't eat another bite. Mary left the couch for the table and set up her computer and notebook. I'm going to take some notes on Cash's show. Network, sponsors, etc. Somewhere in there is a reason for his murder. Why are you so sure it's related to the show? Mary flipped through her notebook. Because he was killed here. It's unlikely that he had beef with a neighbor, and the neighbor traveled all the way to the OIT show to kill him. True, but wasn't his wife with him? The little blonde? Hannah. Yeah, Hannah. Maybe she killed him here, specifically so there would be so many other suspects. Mary pointed at her notebook. Don't worry, I have her at the top of the list. We need to find out everything we can about their marriage. And the actual murder. Do you know what floor he fell from? The railing is pretty high. Was he lifted over? Could he have been pushed? Was he alive when he fell? Unconscious? Did he scream? Did the newspaper say anything? Mary shook her head through my questions. The newspaper just said the police were investigating it as a homicide. She turned back to her computer and wrote in her notebook. I debated another piece of the soft and chewy naan, but decided I wanted my pants to fit tomorrow. Rolling things over in my mind, I couldn't imagine how Cash could have fallen over the railing. Could he have been standing on a chair when someone hit him on the head? But why would he stand on a chair? Maybe he jumped up on the railing to look at the floor and slipped? But then why didn't he scream? If someone was huge like Logan, or even two smaller people working together, they could have lifted him up and over. That seemed like the most likely option so far. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was getting late, but I had 2 messages. One was from Jess back at the center. Still sick, slept all day. Poor Jess. She had been so excited to come with her husband, Robbie, for their anniversary. The second message was from Liam. Hope you're having a good evening in. Game's almost over. We'll be leaving an hour later tomorrow. If you want to go to bed and leave your breakfast order for room service out, we'll place the order when we get back. I grabbed the menu and jotted down my breakfast order. What do you want for breakfast? Liam said he would order for us if we wrote it down. I extended the room service menu to her. What did you order? She continued to write in her notebook. The healthy carnivore, 2 scrambled eggs, sausage, bacon, and a side bowl of fruit. Perfect. Order me one too. I lowered the menu I still had awkwardly extended to her. She was fully engrossed in her project. Next to me on the couch, Moo groaned and rolled onto his back, his large jowls flipping upside down to expose large white teeth. He deeply inhaled and sneezed all across my arm. He flopped back onto his side, his paws dangling off the couch. I got up to waste some time while Mary worked and Moo slept. The bathroom had a spacious countertop where I spread out my makeup, then rinsed the dog slobber off my arm. With a stretch and a large yawn, I reached the limit of what I could do in a hotel room. Hey, I think I'm going to get ready for bed. Wait, Mary stood up. I'm done, but I had a thought. You know who might have information? Becky. Becky? The front desk gal, perky blonde. She was on duty when we checked in. I bet she is working right now. She might have some intel for us. Mary got up. I don't know. I'm really tired and... She was so excited, and it wouldn't take too long. And we could take Moo out one last time, then go straight to bed? Great idea. I clipped the leash on Moo and carefully shut the suite door. I had a pet peeve about people letting their hotel room slam shut, especially after last night when I had repeatedly been woken up right as I fell asleep. As we rode down the elevator, I questioned Mary about the plan. How are we going to investigate if we're stuck behind a table all week? We can talk to people that come to our table, or maybe stop at a booth when we take Moo out for his walks, or in the evenings. I'm hoping to figure out who else was there when we discovered Cash's body. If I see them, I'm sure I would recognize them. The door opened and Mary continued as we walked to the front desk. Our goal is to figure out what Becky knows. Got it? Sure thing, Sherlock. Becky was at the front desk as Mary had predicted, but she was not as perky as described. She had circles under her eyes. Her hair was a bit greasy and haphazardly pulled back into a ponytail. Not in a messy ponytail that magazines explain how to do in 25 easy steps, but the kind of ponytail where the top layer of hair split and the hair beneath stuck out. Half the ponytail twisted left and her side bangs had a wicked case of cowlick. This is the front desk. How can I... Moo! The wariness dropped off her face the second she looked up to see us. Can I give him a treat again? Can I come around and pet him? Sure, he would love that. Moo was the best dog in the whole world. He brought so much joy to others. She came around the front desk. I'm Becky, and I'm sorry, but I don't remember your names. Just Moo's. She gave him an ear scratch and a treat. I'm Di, and this is Mary. How are you doing tonight? She blew a breath out and gave Moo the other treat in her hand. A little tired, but fine, just fine. What can I do for you? Moo finished his treat and nudged her hand for another. She kneeled down and held out her hands. All gone, Moo. He sniffed her all over. She giggled when he stuck his nose into her neck. Then he leaned on her, knocking her over. Easy, Moo. I pulled back on his leash and offered her a hand. Sorry about that. His version of a hug is to lean on you. Oh, that's so sweet. Aren't you a good dog? When she stood up, Moo leaned again and she rubbed his back. I love dogs. You bring him by any time. He's a great distraction from... She gasped and covered her mouth. It's okay. If you mean the murder, we already know all about it. I tried to speak softly, with heavy notes of understanding. Becky kept her eyes on Moo's head. I'm not supposed to talk about it. Mary gave Becky a pat on the back. It's okay. We won't tell anyone. Promise. Becky didn't seem convinced. Maybe if I comforted her a bit more, she would open up. Did you get in trouble? There's no way it was your fault. Becky's head jerked up and she looked at me. I know, right? But my boss wasn't happy about the police being here, or me waking him up in the middle of the night to tell him. What else were you going to do? Put the body in the dumpster out back? Of course you had to call the police. I smiled at her, hoping that I looked like a friendly face to commiserate with. Right. And I did my best to get everyone out of there quickly and keep the police investigation as quiet as possible. She walked back behind the front desk. Mary and I followed her, and I leaned on the counter. You did a great job. Everyone seems to be having a great time in the bar, and no one's mentioned it at all. Maybe it was just an unfortunate accident. Becky shook her head, her ponytail whipping each ear in turn. No way. The police are absolutely sure that he was lifted over the wall and dropped onto the floor below. Mary leaned on the counter next to me. Wow, how'd they know that? Becky shrugged. No idea. I can't remember what they said exactly, but I remember that they totally ruled out that he jumped or tripped or any other kind of accident. If she had paid better attention, we could have had a lot more facts. But he didn't scream, right? She shook her head. I didn't hear any screams or shouts, though I did hear when he landed. She cringed. I jumped when a hand landed on my shoulder and turned to see that Liam and Orion were behind us. Liam removed his hand and chuckled. What are you guys doing up? We were giving Moo one last walk before bed and stopped by to say hi to Becky. I turned back to Becky. It was good chatting with you. I gave her a little wave before following Orion, Mary, and Liam out of the lobby into the courtyard of the hotel center. Liam extended his hand for Moo's leash. Mom already went up to the suite. If you guys want to go up, Orion and I will take Moo outside. I passed the leash over. Thanks. Just knock when he is ready for bed. I left our breakfast order on the room service menu in the kitchenette. I headed to the elevator, then realized that Mary was trailing behind. I stopped to let her catch up. What you thinking about? She shook her head and looked at me. Oh, I was thinking about Cash being unconscious when he was thrown over the side. That's really risky. What if he had woken up and screamed? A good point. Maybe they thought he was dead already. What if they hit him and thought that throwing him over the side would cover up the evidence? I pushed the button on the elevator. That sounds like a spur-of-the-moment thing, a crime of passion, a fight that got out of control, rather than a calculated murder. Mary stepped into the elevator and pressed the top floor. Unless he was drugged and then dropped over the side, that would be a planned murder. I nodded along. I bet the police knew. Either way, lifting an unconscious body over the side of the wall would be pretty hard. You would either have to be pretty strong or have help. Like another person? I was thinking more like a forklift, pulley, or something, but an accomplice would work too. We stepped into the hallway and I lowered my voice. The murderer or murderers are either really quick or really lucky. If someone had stepped into the hallway, they would have been caught. Mary pulled out the key card and unlocked the door. If this was a planned murder, it was a pretty risky plan. Chapter 4. The second day of the OIT show began much as the first had. We were running a bit late, so Mary and I pushed through the throngs of people to the Westmound booth. The Westmound Anderson team was having a meeting first thing this morning, and Liam said he'd see if he could find something for us to do. But for now, we were supposed to hang out at the table they had given us with the literature for the Westmound Center for Competitive Shooting Sports. As we walked, I couldn't hold back a large yawn. We should have gone to bed earlier. I need my sleep. Mary nodded alongside me. Tonight, we can go to bed early. You say that now, but you'll want to stay up and investigate again. Hey now, we got some great information last night. She patted the messenger bag at her side. We have everything we need to know about his show right here. Moo yanked me to the side as he veered to the right. We had walked up to Karma, the yeti target, without me noticing. He pulled away and barked wildly. Hey Moo, easy! I looked around embarrassed. Shh! Shh! His barks transformed into whines, and he danced at the end of the leash. Mary grabbed my arm. Come on, let's just go this way. Mary dragged me farther down the trade show floor, a different way than we had gone before. No point in racing over to Westmound when we're just going to be sitting there again. Well, I guess a small detour wouldn't hurt. We ducked down an aisle to the far side of the floor and cut down another row, when Mary stopped and grabbed my arm in front of a large booth on the corner. She whispered, "It's him!" Mary turned her back to shield her hand from the booth, then pointed back to the corner of the booth. "The bald guy over there next to the cart. He's the one that comforted Hannah, the wife, when we found Cash's body." I spotted who she meant. He was short for a man, probably about my height, but quite muscly. His head completely lacked hair. Perhaps he shaved it? His shoulders were thrown back as he talked with an older man in camouflage pants. The booth surrounding him was large and covered in camo metal objects with wheels and railings, while the back wall had a logo and name, Lux's Hunting Solutions. A few other people stood in the booth. An exceptionally tall gal, and tucked in the corner, sitting at a table, was Hannah, Cash's widow. "Hark, Sherlock! A clue!" I jerked my head in Hannah's direction and waited for Mary to catch on. "Good observation, my dear Watson. Interesting that she's here." I looked around the booth. "What are these things?" "Hunting stuff." I rolled my eyes at her. "The name of the company gave me that much, Sherlock." She chuckled. "Oh, I didn't see that. I forgot that you aren't familiar with hunting. Those over there are tree stands, harnesses, and ladders. In dense woods, people hunt from tree stands. The ladders help you get into the stand. The harness keeps you from dying in the process. There are things to help you process the meat, and those look like some kind of wagon, maybe to help you move the animal after it's down, since they can be difficult to pack out in areas you can't drive cars or four-wheelers. This company is listed as a sponsor of Hunting with Cash." Lex looked toward us and smiled. I nodded my head and started walking away, dragging Mary alongside. After we were past the booth, I whispered at Mary, "Sorry to rush you along. If we stayed any longer, he was going to come and try to sell us stuff." "Smart. I want to investigate him a bit before we talk to him." We zigged and zagged through the booths until we were back at Westmound booth. Behind our table was a brunette gal, lazily looking through the Westmound Center literature. We approached, and Moo put his large head onto the top of the table. She jumped and then laughed. "Hey, puppy!" She looked at our name tags and jumped again. "Oh, I'm in your seat. I'm so sorry. We have a meeting here in a bit, and the seats were empty." She dusted off the chair as the words tumbled out of her mouth. I chuckled lightly. No, it's okay. Please sit. We sat there all yesterday, and if I sit any longer, I'll go nuts." "Are you sure?" She edged back toward the chair. "Yes, please. I'm Di, this is Mary, and this is Moo. We work at the Westmound Center for Competitive Shooting Sports in Wyoming." She shook our hands, then sat down. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jillian, and over there by the shotguns are my husband, Jack, the redhead with the beard, and our videographer, Vinny. We're from the hunting show Jack and Jillian Went Up a Hill." Mary sat next to Jillian. "Cute name for a show. You've a meeting here?" "Yeah, we're meeting with Orion in the next hour. Westmount and their companies are our primary sponsors." I scratched Moo's rump. "That's pretty rare, isn't it?" Something said in passing this week made me think that it was rare for Orion to be involved in sponsorships. Jillian sat back and tucked some brown hair behind an ear. "It is. They sponsor us because they have a shared vision." Moo pushed his rump higher in the air to get the most scratches from me that he could on his back. "Oh, such as?" "Our show really is about getting everyone to hunt with a focus on the end product, providing meat for your family. We have a variety of hunts on the show, many of which focus on a guest hunter. Usually every season we have a disabled vet or a first-time hunter. A couple of times we've had a father and his child come on the show. We do a lot of emphasis on safe, humane harvesting. I end each show with a recipe to make at home, and all the meat we gather is shared with the homeless and poor community in our area." Her face was lit up with excitement, her hands gesturing wildly. "Wow, that sounds awesome." It is. It's the most amazing experience to teach people how to provide for their family. We are really lucky to partner with Westmount. They share our values about giving more people the opportunity to hunt. It can be a tough sell to sponsors. I tilted my head. Why? 'Cause it's not cool, and the viewership is only about average. We're not one of the big bulls and buck shows. We have solid numbers, but we are not blowing anyone out of the water. A lot of what we do is education and outreach, both on the show and off. Moo flipped onto my foot, exposing his belly while flattening his backpack beneath him. I crouched down to scratch his considerable chest. I can see why Westmound partnered with you. How long have you been doing the show? Gee, we just finished our 7th season. Time has flown by. Moo was grunting and flailing his legs about on the booth floor. A few people were snickering. I pulled him to his feet. You've been around for a while then. You probably knew Cash from Hunting with Cash? Yes, I've met him. Her tone had gone flat. What was he like? I don't know him at all. She gave it in a monotone, making no eye contact, instead looking at some of the literature on the table. The conversation we had been having came to a screeching halt. I looked at Mary for help. Didn't you hear he's dead? He's what? When? What happened? Jillian looked up alarmed. 2 nights ago in the hotel. He was killed, Mary said softly. Oh! Jillian covered her mouth. I hadn't heard. I feel awful. One of the conference room doors was ajar, and I grabbed a folding chair and sat down. Why do you feel bad? She looked around, then lowered her voice. I never liked him, and now I feel terrible for not liking him. Was it an accident? I shook my head. No, the police are investigating it as a homicide. What was he like? She sucked air through her teeth. Homicide? Oh my. I couldn't possibly talk ill of the dead. She shook her head sadly. Mary looked at me and nodded, then faced Jillian. Totally understandable, poor man. We shouldn't speak of him. But we were thinking about writing an article about how hunting shows are made. Can you tell us about that? Oh, yes. What do you need to know? Mary opened her bag and pulled out the notebook. This is what we know so far. You buy time from a network and get money from your sponsors, then use the money to pay for the time and to produce the show. Is that about right? Jillian smiled broadly. Not a bad start. You make it sound so easy, she chuckled. Mary scribbled in her notebook and continued to interview. Is there just one hunting channel or a couple? There are tons of different ones, and every time I turn around, someone is trying to pitch a new channel. Jillian waved her hand at the idea of a new channel. For the article, you'll probably want to focus on the 3 big hunting channels: America's Best Sports, Real Outdoor Adventures, and Wilderness Hunts. They are way ahead of all the rest of the channels when it comes to viewership numbers. A whole different league. Mary was scribbling in her notebook. Wilderness, hunts. Okay, all caught up. How are the 3 stations different? There's a ton of little differences. Do you have any particular area you're interested in? Mary tapped her pen on the notebook. Let's say that Di and I have a hunting show. What are the pluses and minuses of each channel? Good question. Jillian leaned forward in her seat. First off, you'll need a pilot to show the production quality of the show and the basic format. Then you'll try to get a meeting to pitch the show. Depending on your pitch, they might offer you a few time slots. Their goal is to have as many people view their channel as possible, so they will pick shows that they think people will want to watch. Plus, they want a variety. Some bow hunting, some gun shows, domestic, international. You understand. Mary flipped the page of her notebook and moved it to the table. Are prices about the same? Not even close. Let's take America's Best Sports. They are the most expensive, but are in the most households. If you have a satellite or cable and get the sports or deluxe package, then you probably have their channel. But they're not purely a hunting channel. They have little blocks during the weekday for midday fishing and hunting shows. The rest of the time, it's other sports or sports talk shows or whatever. Some people like this because they have a bigger audience, but others argue that it isn't the right audience to sell their products. Mary looked up from her notebook. Not the right audience? Jillian leaned back in her chair. That's the theory. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is wilderness hunts. They only do hunting shows, and they are subscription only. People pay for that particular channel. So the assumption is that all of the viewers are the right demographic to sell the products. Prices are lower, but they are in much fewer households. They only do hunting shows. Their prices are cheaper, and you get 3 time slots for your price. The idea is that you get 1 prime time slot, then 2 reruns during less prime time slots. This was all fascinating background. Which station are you on? We're on the Real Outdoor Adventures, which splits the difference between the channels, you could say. Price point, production quality, household numbers, and you get 1 rerun. Plus, the channel's a bit more diverse when it comes to programming. In addition to hunting shows, they also have fishing and competitive shooting sports, a real well-rounded channel. Plus, it is a channel that Westmound prefers. A lot of the time, your sponsors make the decision for you since they have a theory on which channel works for them. Mary kept writing, and we waited silently. Once she was finished, she looked up at Jillian. Tell me about these theories you keep mentioning. We don't have any proof of how much hunting shows or pro staff contracts or any of that affects sales, if at all. Because people aren't going out of business, we assume it's working, but it's a bit of a mystery. So in general, companies play it safe. They want something new but still very familiar, basically variations on a theme. They like certain time slots and certain channels. I met a gal a few years ago that hosted a target archery competitive reality show. Its first season, it had great viewership numbers, but they couldn't get any sponsors for a second season because it was too different from everything else being done. Wonder what she's doing now. Mary held up her finger. Hold on. So do you start with the sponsors or the station? Because you need money to buy the time slot, but you said sponsors prefer certain channels. It's a juggling act for sure. You talk to a bunch of sponsors and figure out who might be interested and what they want, i.e. a certain channel or they want a title sponsor. Then you go and get the time slot, then go back and try to get the sponsors. Our first year, we self-funded the show with only a few sponsors who mostly provided equipment. We lost money that season. Second year, we broke even, but didn't pull a salary. But since the third season, we've been able to pay ourselves for the show. We'll never buy a vacation house in Hawaii, but we love what we do. Mary flipped the notebook to a new page. The sponsors give you money. What do they get? Their name on the opening? Depends on negotiation. All of the stations give you a certain number of commercial spots, so often a large sponsor gets a commercial. A banner at the beginning of the show, product integration in the show, using only their product and describing it. Basically, if you can imagine it, it can be done. Sitting back, I contemplated the information. While it was useful for this article that we hadn't even committed to writing, it didn't tell us much about Cash's murder. How competitive is it to get sponsors? Jillian grimaced before continuing. It can get interesting. Nothing really underhanded, I think, but we're all competing for the same money. I don't know what happens behind closed doors. Some people might try to casually undercut another show without being too obvious, like posting online about, our show does this, unlike other shows that do that. Or you might see marketing guys, the ones who decide who get the money, being taken on private hunting trips by the host of the shows. Sometimes it's a real old boys club, lots of chumming around. So, potentially, behind closed doors, other shows could be undercutting the competitors? That's a possible motive. Or overplaying their own strengths. Viewership numbers are kept very hush-hush, even by the networks themselves. You can buy likes, follows, friends, views, and such on social media to make it look like you have a larger fan base. It can be a strange business. Mary shifted forward in her seat. What about time slots? Do people fight over them? Jillian pressed a finger to her lips. I'm not totally sure. We found a time slot we liked. Our numbers were solid, but the price wasn't too high, and we've stayed there. but I know that other shows are jostling around for position. A few years ago, the 3 Billy brothers lost their time slot. To who? Mary was shifted so far forward she was perched precariously on the edge of her seat. Hunting with Cash, actually. People say that he stole it out from under the Billy brothers. And there was something off about Cash's show after. The conference door behind Jillian opened, and she stopped talking as Orion stepped out of the room. Hey, Jillian. Sorry we're running late. If you want to grab Jack and Vinny, we can meet in this room. He indicated the empty conference room I had stolen a chair from. Jillian stood up. It was great to meet you both. If you have any other questions for your article, we'll be around. Elizabeth and Connie nodded as they passed. Then Liam called out from the room they left. Di, Mary, can you come in here? Mary gathered up her notebooks and we went into the room to sit across from Liam. Orion hung around in the doorway. Liam pulled out a sheet of paper and slid it across to me. We talked and came up with a little project for you and Mary. There are 2 optic companies that are making spotting scopes, binoculars, and rangefinders. We're considering buying one or both of them. How about if you guys spend some time at each booth, look at the product line, catalogs, and staff, and we can talk about it later? Whoa, you want us to do research? Liam lightly chuckled. No pressure. Mom and Connie thought it'd be a good project to get you familiar with how we make decisions. You and Mary can make your observations, then we'll get together and talk to you about what's important and why. Don't tell them why you're there, but don't lie either. If they ask, say that you're curious about their products. That should only take a few hours. The rest of the time, you're free to do whatever you want at the show. Walk around, learn about the industry, become familiar with the companies and products, and try to solve Cash's murder. What? Why do you think... Liam leaned back in his chair with a chuckle. Come on, Di. I know you and Mary. Plus, Orion said from behind me, someone left out their murder notebook last night. I chuckled. But seriously, is it cool if we do some poking around? We'll stay out of trouble. Liam shook his head. I doubt that. If you come back around noon, we'll get food for you. Orion stepped out of the room. Come on, Liam. We're ready for the next meeting. Liam gave Moo a scratch on the back as he stepped into the next room and closed the door behind him. Muffled voices came through the thin walls. Left in the room alone, I turned to Mary. What now? Our options were completely open, and I was excited to get started. Mary studied her notebook seriously. How about if we find Sarah and ask her to set up some interviews for us? We can continue using the article as an excuse to talk to some people. Swing over to talk to the first company on Liam's list, then come back for lunch? You're the boss, Sherlock. I'm just here for comic effect. Moo and I stepped out of the room into the Westmound booth to stretch a bit. Now that I was free to wander the trade show floor, I was eager to break free. Right across the aisle was Logan from the Anderson booth. Hey, Logan. He had been talking to another employee, but looked up. Hey, Di. Hey, Moo. How's it hanging, dude? We crossed the aisle, dodging a few people on the way. I looked over my shoulder to check that I was still inside of the doorway to the room so Mary could find me. Logan knelt down to roughhouse with Moo, rubbing him hard on the neck and tapping him. Who's a good dog? Who's a good dog? Moo was getting wound up and suddenly barked and spun in a circle, hitting Logan in the side with his butt and sending Logan down. Moo spun back the opposite direction and flopped across Logan's chest, causing him to grunt. I pulled back on Moo's leash. Get off! You okay down there? He groaned and sat up. My brothers would say I picked a fight outside my weight class. Whoa! He held his hands up and leaned away from Moo. Dude, he's growling. No! I pulled on Moo's leash. He seldom growled. I followed his stare toward the front of the trade show. From here, the white yeti was visible. Oh, he's not growling at you. He has an issue with that target thingy down there. Logan turned to look down the aisle, then patted Moo on the back before standing. I feel you, Moo. Karma will get you. He looked at me. Have you been to the tournament yet? Do you know about Karma the Yeti? I shook my head. Karma is the last target on the range. Really tricky shot. 120 yards over a ravine. It's always windy with an updraft. So you'll be shooting great, then hit that target, and everything goes wrong. Everyone says karma will get you whenever you start bragging about how great you're shooting. Hey, you should come to the shoot and bring minks. Bring minks where? Said Mary from behind me. I stepped aside to let her join the conversation and answered her question. Red Bluff Safari to shoot karma. If you're going, then I'm going. Mary nodded her head at the statement of fact. Like I'm ready to jet off to tournaments alone. Isn't the Red Bluff Safari a compound thing? Logan shrugged. Kinda. Most people that shoot use a compound, but you could do it with your recurve. What's the longest distance and target you guys shoot? I turned to Mary, waiting for her answer. 70 meters at a 122 centimeter target. Logan stared at her for a few counts, then hesitantly asked, how far is that? About 77 yards at a 4-foot target, or 3/4 of a football field at a target about this tall. She raised her hand to about bra level. Logan nodded. If you can do that, you can totally shoot Red Bluff Safari. I'll come and help you get ready. Mary gasped as an idea hit her. You know what would help us? Have you heard anything about the guy that died in the hotel? Cash? Dude, that's so crazy. A lot of people have been talking about it. Cold was his videographer after his original guy backed out. Did some filming and editing. Moose was talking about it too. He used to work with Cash, but had some falling out. As soon as Moose said that, Cold suddenly started backpedaling about working with Cash. Like, yeah, I knew there was something off about that guy. When a few seconds earlier, he'd been calling Cash a smart businessman. I just stayed quiet. Logan looked over each shoulder, then leaned in and lowered her voice. The egos can be a bit crazy. I've got great co-workers, though. Mary was nodding along. Did the Anderson employees say anything about Cash? Not really. He shook his head. Except, one of the guys said that they were steering clear of him. Said something was off. He's dead now, so they dropped the topic pretty quick. Minx told me that you guys have been solving murders. Are you on the case again? I chuckled. You've been talking to Minx, eh? Yeah, I've been texting here and there. He looked over my shoulder and nodded. Sorry, I gotta jet and help a customer. I'll see if I can dig up any more dirt for you two. He trotted around us with a, Hi, I'm Logan. How can I help you, sir? We were late for lunch as we left the second trade show hall and headed back to the booth. There were lines of people in the food court between the second and main hall. We had a busy morning after leaving Anderson Archery. We had spent more than an hour at the first optics company, Focal Optics. We got some catalogs, tried the products, met some of the salespeople. After that, we ran into Sarah from the OIT show, and Mary told her we would do the article on how hunting shows are made, and asked if she could set up a meeting for us. The rest of the morning had passed quickly as we took Moo for a walk outside, then gave the second exhibit hall a once-over. It was mostly the newer and smaller companies. My arms were loaded down with catalogs that had been foisted on me by eager salespeople. Something caught my attention and I stopped. Di, Mary, a male voice called, and I turned to spot Indy, a young adult I had met last month at the summit. Hey, Indy, are you here with your dad? Indy was Cold's son, and I looked around to see if he was lurking somewhere. Yeah. He took off with Candy somewhere. Where are you guys going? I'll go with you. He sneered at Candy's name, and I couldn't blame him. He then gave Mary and me a gangly hug and fell in step beside us. We have a lunch meeting. I felt bad for him. He had driven me nuts last month, but he was so much like a floppy-eared puppy, especially with his bangs sliding over his eyes as he walked. He was only a few years younger than Mary, but he felt much younger than that. Cool. Hey, is Minx here? He wedged between Mary and me, looking back and forth between us. No, I shook my head. She's moving up to the center this week. What have you been up to? I'm going to help Dad film this season. He really needs me. His face lit up. Cold might be a jerk to us, but it seemed like he was a good father. But stupid Candy keeps getting in the way. She's nothing but trouble. He muttered under his breath as he tripped on the base of the doorway heading into the main exhibit hall. Oh? Totally. This is our project, and she keeps wedging herself into it. She's self-centered and just using Dad. I shrugged. That definitely sounded like Candy. Sorry, buddy. What are you working on this weekend? We're getting new product videos to put up on Dad's website, but Candy has decided that she should do the interviewing. She talks too fast and talks over people. She's a hag. They go out drinking every night until late, so I'm stuck in the room alone. Luckily, she's not in our room. We filmed the opening ceremony and concert for the OIT Association, so they provided the room. Mary leaned in. You have footage of the opening ceremony? Do you think you could get us a copy without your dad knowing? Totally. Yeah, I could do that for you guys. He smiled widely. He was so eager to please. Thanks, Indy. Why don't we treat you to lunch tomorrow as a thank you? He ducked his head and cast his eyes at the ground. Yeah, cool. We approached the Westmound booth, and I spotted Liam and Orion hanging around and waved. We walked over, and Indy practically fell over himself. Hi, Orion. Hi, Liam. Hey, I'm really sorry that I had to pull my OSA application. Living at the Westmound Center would be the coolest, but Dad really needs me to help this season, and he's really counting on me. I hope to one day be able to apply, and I don't want you to think I'm some butt munch or something. He spoke quickly, rushing to get it all out in one breath. Liam chuckled and clapped Indy on the shoulder. No problem, man. Indy burst into another monologue, this time asking about new products with questions he already knew the answer to. He would ask a question, and then, after Orion and Liam nodded, he explained why it was so cool. He seemed excited to hang out with Orion and Liam. Mary and I hung back, giving them space. Liam caught my eye and smiled at me. As he turned back to his conversation, something caught his eye. His eyes narrowed, and he mumbled, Be right back, to Indy. I turned to follow his sightline and saw a cold coming down the aisle. I nudged Mary, who was playing on her phone, and jerked my head toward Liam. I took several steps back to distance myself from Orion and Liam's talking and crouched next to Moo. Who's a good dog? Straining to hear Liam, I slowly crept backwards a few more steps. Liam's voice was flat. Cold, we need to talk about the Westmound Summit footage. You got my email, Liam. I canceled the contract. Liam's voice held steady, but there was a bite around the edges. That's the opposite of how contracts work. Fine, Cole barked. I sneaked a glance. Cole was rubbing his nose with one hand over and over while digging in his backpack. Here. He shoved a bag at Liam. That's all the footage I have. Good enough? Liam grabbed the bag. Yeah, we're done. Cole yelled, Indy, get over here. Cole grabbed Indy's arm as he got close, and his angry voice carried to us. I told you to stay where I left you. Indy whined in reply, barely audible from this distance. But, Dad, you were gone for hours. The rest was lost as they walked off. Liam came over to us, shaking his head. That guy. Ready for lunch? Today's pasta and salad. We filed into one of the conference rooms, falling into an easy pattern as Liam and Orion unpacked bags of food while I grabbed drinks from the cooler and Mary passed around utensils, napkins, and plates. It was quiet, but not tense. We spooned food onto our plates and began eating. Orion grabbed some olives from a container. Did you get everything settled with Cold? Liam pushed the memory cards across the table. Yeah, but let everyone know that we're not working with him again. Something's off. I looked between them. What happened? Orion looked at Liam and he nodded. Orion turned back to us. You guys remember that Cold filmed the Westmound Summit? Yeah, and he was a total jackwagon. Yes, he was. The contract was to have the footage uploaded and a hard drive sent to us within a week. We try to get the information out to all the companies right away so they are prepared by the time the trade show comes around. Cold started making excuses right away, saying the murder investigation interfered with his ability to do the job. He made excuse after excuse, then he emails and says he's canceling the contract. Liam interrupted. You can't cancel a contract for no reason. That's the point of a contract. Right. I kind of doubt that these have anything on them, but it's a bit late to use them if they do. Orion picked up the bag and shoved it into a satchel behind the table. I feel bad for Indy. He seems like a nice kid, but Cold's on a bad path. What do you mean? I bit into the tart pepper on my Italian salad, enjoying both the meal and the chance to swap gossip. Cold's emails got a bit... He looked at Liam as he tried to pick a word. Liam volunteered. Unhinged? Yeah, we got a couple of emails with lots of typos and rambling run-on sentences sent at 2 a.m. That sounded like a totally different person. I pretty much gave up on ever getting anything from him. Liam nodded along and passed a bag down the table. Garlic bread. I grabbed a breadstick and passed the bag on to Mary. I inhaled the delicate scent of yeast, garlic, and butter. Leaning back in my chair, I closed my eyes and savored the moment before biting into the soft, chewy, gluteny goodness. How were your mornings? I looked at Liam and Orion between bites. Liam, as always the quiet one, shrugged. Orion grabbed a breadstick from the same bag. Met with some people, same old, same old. Jillian mentioned you're writing an article on the hunting industry. We nodded along like, of course we have a clue what you two are up to. Mary giggled and smiled at Orion. It's part of our plan to hide our investigation of Cash's death. The article, which was Sarah from the OIT show's idea originally, gives us an excuse to ask pointed questions without people calling us nosy. Smart. Orion raised his hand and gave Mary a high five over the table. Mary took an intense interest in her pasta, the tips of her ears turning the slightest shade of pink. I stabbed at my pasta. Do you know anything about Cash? Did any of the Westmound companies sponsor him? That, Orion pointed at me, is a great question and one we've no way of answering. Elizabeth brought that up this week. There is no way for us at Westmound Anderson to know what archers are representing which of our companies other than to ask the individual or the companies. It gets even fuzzier when we talk about free products versus non-contracted shooters. The same is true for the firearms company. Is there a way to fix that? I love these kinds of challenges. In my old job, these questions were what fueled the solutions we had created for our clients. Yes, you have a lot of options depending on how your companies are currently tracking their shooters, how much work you want them to do in keeping the system updated, and your overall goals. Liam leaned forward on the table. We give our companies a lot of freedom in how they market, but is there a way for us to more easily keep an eye on what they are doing? We could create a database on the cloud, which would require them to update it every time they gave out money or products. Or you could do something where an off-site person updates the records based on a report from the company. That would depend on how much you want to force the companies to change. Liam and Orion exchanged a look before Orion continued. It would be nice to look at all the companies and see which shooters are receiving what money and products so we could make some overall branding decisions and know who is representing our companies when they're on the internet posting racist and sexist stuff. Mary swallowed quickly before joining the conversation. Someone told us that sometimes sponsorship is given out because the marketing person gets free hunts and stuff. Liam groaned and buried his face in his hands. Mary looked around. Was that wrong? Liam lifted his hands. No, it's right, and that's the problem. This is a huge company, not kids swapping lunches. He turned his head to me. You think you could help us out? I nodded. Absolutely. There's a way to get the information into a form that you guys can analyze. It all depends on what you want and how it's implemented. We went back to our meals, picking at the last bits of food on our plate. I was lost in thought at all the questions that had been brought up. How did the various companies track their sponsorships now? Was there one person making the decision or several people? Would they be upset with Westmound Anderson looking over their shoulders? A thought occurred to me. Logan. Everyone looked at me. He just got the job at Anderson, and they're one of your bigger companies. He seems pretty eager to make a good impression, and he's new enough to the industry, and especially this job, to not be set in his ways. You could use him as a test subject on this new tracking system. Work out the kinks, then implement it company-wide once it's working well. Liam and Orion exchanged another look. They seemed to have perfected the art of communicating without words. Liam rubbed a hand on his beard. Good idea. We'll grab him this week and chat with him. I know he wants to come out to the center in Wyoming to train, so maybe we could discuss it more one of those times when he's out. The meal was winding down. Orion gathered a few things at the table. What's your plan for the rest of the day? Mary and I exchanged a look. The boys weren't the only one who could communicate without words. Mary answered, We're going to hit the floor and walk around. It took us most of the morning to see the other show hall and visit Focal Optics, so I doubt we can even finish seeing this hall and maybe swing by the other optics company. I nodded. Crystal Clear Optics. Moo came over, having woken up from his nap, and pawed at my leg. Moo says it's time to go outside. We tidied up the room as a team, gathering up trash, closing containers, wiping down the table. Stepping from behind Liam, I heard a voice ring out. There he is! Liam! I followed the voice to discover Hannah, Cash's wife, on her tiptoes pointing at Liam. Chapter 5. Hannah darted around the employee she had been talking to and approached Liam, dabbing at her eyes. Her eye makeup was perfect, and there was no evidence of crying, but she sniffled delicately before talking. Oh, Liam, I was hoping to talk to you. I'm Cash's widow and... She stopped mid-sentence and brought a clean tissue to her clear eyes again. Liam looked like a deer in the headlights, and it only increased when she placed a hand on his arm and collapsed onto it to cry. He looked around for help. Unfortunately, we have a full schedule. Perhaps we can get you a water? I scooted back into the room and grabbed a plastic bottle of water, and as I stepped back out with Moo, I grabbed Mary's arm to drag her next to me. I tapped Hannah on the shoulder. When she turned, I offered the water. How are you? All 4 of us were there when you found your husband. She took the water from my hand and opened it to take a drink. She carefully looked at Liam and Orion, then Mary and me. 2 men, 2 women traveling together, and did the math. She put the lid back on and faced me. I'm barely holding on. Pardon my breakdown. I just wanted to thank everyone that found Cash after his fall. I stepped between her and Liam and put an arm around her shoulder, steering her farther away. Of course, if there's anything I can do, you just let me know. She stepped away and we exchanged a long look. She was much shorter than my average height. This close, I realized she was much older than I had guessed. I had pegged her age around mine, 30, but she was probably in her 40s. Her makeup was impeccable and expertly done. There was not a single wrinkle on her forehead or between her eyebrows, though there was the faint play of crow's feet at the corner of her eyes. Most likely she used Botox to tame those forehead muscles. Her lips were full, but in the trout pout way that indicated fillers. She was thin, but had a strength to her. Probably hours in the gym with yoga, Pilates, or whatever exercise class was most popular right now. Her hair was laced with highlights and lowlights, each whimsical curl turning just right. She looked great and obviously spent a lot of money to maintain that look. She was everything that Candy, with her heavy makeup and brassy hair color, strived to be but missed. Her voice was cool when she replied, Thank you, I'll be fine. Then she turned on her petite feet and walked away. Moo whined next to me, and I realized I was clenching the muscles in my mouth, my teeth grinding. Shh, Moo, it's okay. I stomped back to Mary. She was staring with wide eyes. Die? I cast a glance over my shoulder, then leaned in to Mary to say in a quiet voice, Can you believe she came over here sniffing around Liam? I looked around for Liam, but both he and Orion were gone, probably in a meeting. Die? Mary repeated. She did it. I just know it. Die? What? Hearing my own voice in my ear, I was embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean to snap. I mean, what? I said in a gentler tone. Your face is really red." "What?" I lifted a hand to my face, pushing on my hot cheeks. "You went all Hulk when she touched Liam, but instead of green, you went red. I thought you were going to hit her." "But I kind of thought I handled it smoothly." The anger drained out of me, and embarrassment rose in its place. Mary shook her head. "I've seen boxing matches that were less aggressive." Frantically, I looked around the booth to see if anyone had noticed. Perhaps they would be staring and laughing. "Do you think anyone saw?" Mary smiled. "Liam looked totally relieved when you marched her away, but Orion was holding back laughter." I rubbed my forehead. "Oh, geez, this is embarrassing." "Why? Everyone knows you two are a thing." "We're not a thing." She rolled her eyes. "You are so a thing. There's a betting pool at the training center." "There is not. Who is in it? What does it say?" I gasped. She shrugged. "No idea. I only found out by accident, and they won't tell me anymore. They said I was too close and it'd be like insider betting." "Why didn't you tell me?" "You never brought up Liam that way. I know you're really private and you would bring it up when you are ready." "Oh, Mary, I'm private, but we're friends. You can tell or ask me anything." She smiled. "Okay then, do you really think Hannah killed Cash, or were you just mad?" I leaned back and gave the question weight. "She was definitely buttering Liam up for something, or trying to. That's weird. We thought it was weird when Candy did it last month, and it's weird now." Mary scooted closer so our sides were pressed up against each other and no one could overhear. "She's so tiny. No way she could have thrown his body over the wall onto the floor below. She either found a way to do it alone or had help. She was already at the top of the list, but this little act today really made me suspicious. Tonight, let's see if we can figure out what floor he fell from, and if there was any way she could have done it alone. We'll nail her to the wall." "If she's guilty?" "Huh?" I turned to Mary. "Only if she's guilty will you nail her to the wall?" "Of course." She shook her head and blew out a sigh. "Good. You were sounding a bit bloodthirsty there for a bit. Want to take Moo out for a walk, then get started?" "Good idea. I could use some cold air on my face to clear my head." The afternoon had lazily crawled along. We visited Crystal Clear Optics, the second name on the Westmound's list. It was a high-end booth with a beautiful array of products. A saleswoman had given us a suggested retail price list that blew my socks off. But after looking through a few spotting scopes and seeing the image quality, I was wondering if I should save up to buy one myself. We had seen about a third of the main exhibit hall booths. Then we ran into Sarah, who had news for us. "Glad to catch y'all. Tony Moore at Real Outdoor Adventures said he could fit you in for an interview for your article. If you follow this aisle all the way to the end and turn left, you'll see the booth. Just let the secretary at the front desk know I sent you over to meet with Tony Moore, and she'll take care of you. Sorry, gotta run." Without a second look back, she darted away. Mary was still digging through her bag and pulled out her notebook to jot down the name. "Should we head over there now?" I nodded. "Do you have a plan, Sherlock?" "I'll start with the stuff we need for the article and see if I can bring up Cash at all. His website had Real Outdoor Adventures listed as their channel for the last season." As we walked along, people pointed at Moo and whispered. A few even greeted him by name, though none said anything to Mary or me. I guess Moo is the real celebrity around here. Mary snorted. Maybe we should pitch a hunting show to this guy. Hunting with Moo. Moo and Moose? We could get him an orange safety jacket and a pair of doggy binos. We snorted as we approached the Real Outdoor Adventures booth. It had 2 rows of offices, the doors facing each other like a hallway in a school. There was a large flat-screen TV playing hunting footage. Set a few feet to the left of the TV was a podium with a pretty blonde behind it. Mary stepped forward and looked at her notebook before greeting the lady. "Hi, Sarah from the OIT show sent us over to set up an interview with Tony Moore." She looked us over carefully, not rudely, but not friendly either. I wondered if her job was more gatekeeper than anything. "Hold on 1 second." She moved to the row of offices on the left and knocked on the middle of 3 doors. She ducked into the room, and when she stepped back, she was far more welcoming. She had a bright smile on her face, and she waved us over. "Can I get either of you a water?" She pushed the door open and gestured for us to enter. "Nothing for me." I stepped into the room, slapping my thigh to get Moo's attention. "No, thank you," Mary said as she followed me in and sat down next to me. We introduced ourselves to Tony and shook hands while the blonde closed the door to the office. Tony sat back in his seat. "Can you explain to me what the interview is about?" Mary pulled out her notebook. "We were talking to Sarah about the hunting industry, and she suggested we write an article on the topic. So here we are." "And how does this relate to Westmound?" He pointed at her shirt. "It doesn't. We both work at the Westmound Center for Competitive Shooting Sports in Wyoming and came to the OIT show, but it turns out they don't need us. I also write articles about the archery industry, and since we were just hanging around, Sarah asked if I could write an article." He raised his eyebrows. "I've heard of the Westmound Center. It's supposed to be really nice." "It is really nice." He leaned back in his seat and clasped his hands together. "We have a show all about competitive shooting. I wonder if the center would be interested in working with them." I dug into my bag and grabbed one of Robbie's business cards and handed it across the table. "This is the director of the center. I'm sure he would love to talk to you about it." "Thank you." He slipped the card into the portfolio holding a legal-sized pad of lined yellow paper. "Are you a writer as well?" I laughed. "No, I'm just the sidekick, and Moo's our mascot." I gestured to Moo, who was sprawled across the floor. He chuckled and turned back to Mary. "Just to warn you, I am sneaking this between 2 other meetings. If we can't finish today, I might be able to meet again later." "No problem. We'll just skip the part where we pitch you our own hunting show and go straight to the questions," Mary quipped. "You wouldn't be the first to pitch an outrageous hunting show. Everyone wants one. People are constantly telling me they have a great idea for a show." He pursed his lips and shook his head. "What makes a great show?" Mary looked at him, her pen poised in the air, ready to write down his answer. "First off, any show that wants consideration has to have a minimum level of production quality with interesting hosts. That's a given. A show would submit a pilot to us, and if we offer you a time slot, we expect you to maintain that quality." Mary was scribbling in her notebook. "Let's assume they are interesting enough and the show looks good. What's next?" "We try to balance our schedule. We have 4 quarters for 10 to 12 weeks each quarter, with a few extra weeks here and there. Most of our shows run for 1 quarter a year. We try to balance each quarter. Some hunting, some fishing, some competitive shooting. Then we want to get a good mix within those categories. So salt versus freshwater fishing, bow hunting versus rifle, public land versus private hunts, that kind of thing. But all those shows have to promote ethical hunting and fishing practices, as well as firearms and general safety." They continued to talk about demographics of the modern outdoor sports person while I zoned out. I was starting to feel the late nights and early mornings. Since moving to Wyoming and taking the job at the center, my stress levels had fallen off immensely. I usually slept 9 hours every night and did a variety of physical activities every day, from shooting archery to hitting the weight room for a quick jog and weight circuit. I was probably already healthier after a few months than I had been any time since college. The drowsiness was coming over me, and I fidgeted in my seat to stay awake. Maybe if I closed my eyes for just a second to rest them, I'd feel better. But instead, I jerked awake in my seat as I started to drift off. Moo was up and poking me in the side with his nose. I could blame some of my lack of sleep on Moo, who kicked me in the side at 2 a.m. when he was dreaming about running. I shifted in my seat some more, trying to find a comfortable position. The pasta from lunch was heavy in my stomach, and I'd kill for a blanket and pillow. Mary was writing down something about commercial time slots, how many banners were allowed during the show's introduction, and when contracts were renewed. If I didn't fall asleep soon, I was most definitely going to die of boredom. I heard my voice talking before my brain had actually decided to speak. Hunting with Cash was on your channel, right? Mary turned to stare at me, her nostrils flaring. Tony looked at me, but his face was totally blank. Real outdoor adventures must train all their staff to master the unreadable expression. It was decided a few weeks ago that we would be parting ways. We're sorry for his family's loss. It was a diplomatic and appropriate statement. What wasn't he saying? I waffled for a second but pressed on. Probably smart. I heard there was something off about his last season. Tony slammed the table with his hand, and I almost fell out of my seat as I jumped. He pointed at me. I knew it. I knew there was something off, but no one believed me. I had a hand at my chest. Sorry, you startled me. I thought something was off but couldn't prove it. I don't have the time to watch every episode of every show, but I started hearing about these unbelievable animals he was getting during public hunts. And after seeing the pictures, I started to think that maybe they literally were unbelievable. What's a public land hunt? I looked between Mary and Tony. Sorry, I don't hunt. Mary shook her head. Super simple explanation of hunting. You get a tag for a particular kind of animal, like a bull elk, for a certain section at a certain time. In the section is public land like national forest and BLM rangeland, and there's private land, which is just that, land owned by people. Anyone can hunt public land if they have the proper tag, but you need landowner permission to hunt private land. Otherwise, you're trespassing, which is a huge deal. I nodded along. And why is a big animal on public land unbelievable? Tony answered. Anyone can hunt on public land, so you have a lot of people trampling through the woods looking for a few animals. The pressure often pushes the animals off public land onto private, where there might only be a couple of people. You can get monsters on public land, but it's a lot harder and doesn't happen as often. A private hunt doesn't guarantee you anything unless it's a canned hunt, which we don't allow. But your odds are better, especially at those places that are charging $5,000 or $10,000 for a hunt. 10,000? Yep. Though for a hunting show, they normally lower the fee and or trade exposure on the show. How do I explain this? He tapped his fist on his chin while staring off into the distance. It wasn't just that he got his huge bucks on supposedly public hunts. Something just fell off. His early seasons were all really typical animals. Then there was a season with one monster. Then the next season, everything he killed was a monster. Every animal was bigger than the last every time. The episodes felt choppy. Sometimes the area where he shot the animal looked really different than the camp, or he wouldn't show the camp at all. I can never prove it, but the whole thing made me think something was off or wrong. We're not even getting into the difficulty of drawing tags for certain areas. That's a whole different situation. Mary nodded along. Yeah, I just gave the most general description I could, but reality is far more complicated than I can explain in a few sentences, for sure. So, Hunting with Cash moved to another channel? Yes, he came into negotiations and tried to play hardball. He wanted the best time slot. Said next season was going to blow the last season away, which only made me more nervous. In the end, I couldn't give him the time slot or price he wanted, and I was pleased when he said he would be here negotiating a new time slot with other channels. I think that was supposed to intimidate me. There was a knock on the door, and the blonde stuck her head in. So sorry to interrupt, but Tony, your next appointment's here and waiting. Mary shut her notebook and packed it up. We'll get going. Thank you so much. Tony shook our hands. Did you get everything you need? We got off track a little at the end. If you need any more information, stop on by or email me. He handed a card to Mary. We left the booth and headed outside to give Moo a chance to stretch his legs. I mulled over what Tony had explained. Watson, I think Cash was killed because of this whole TV show business, but I'm not sure who or why. I just don't know enough about hunting shows. I smiled at her. I still think Hannah is suspect number one, but you could be right, Sherlock. Let's try to logic this out. If he lied, I'm sure people would be pissed, but who would want to kill him? Sponsors of the show? It could make them look bad if one of their hunters was caught being unethical, but killing still seems extreme. What about someone on staff? Wasn't Cold his camera person last season? Oh man, I would love it if it was Cold. He is such a huge jerk. Maybe it was Hannah and Cold together? Could be, and that would get a thorn out of my side, but I wish I knew more. What we really need is someone who could explain what would happen if he did what Tony thinks he did. I stopped and pointed at a camo booth we were passing. Ask and you shall receive. Look! Chapter 6. Jillian was in a camouflage booth, listlessly poking at a row of fluffy socks. Mary rubbed her hands together. Perfect. She walked over to Jillian. Hey, Jillian, how was the rest of your morning? She looked up with a smile. Hey, good to see you both. She stepped in a bit closer and looked around. About to lose my mind. I'm not used to standing around for hours doing nothing. Don't you have people to talk to? I wondered. Making deals and such? She shrugged. We finished all our meetings. Now we're just looking at products and potential sponsors. You always need more. That's not really my job, which is good because most people want to talk to Jack and Vinny anyway. I'm awful at small talk. She poked at some long underwear. Mary and I were just heading outside to give Moo a walk for a few minutes. Why don't you come with us? Oh, she dragged the word out and looked at her husband and Vinny in a conversation with a salesman. I probably shouldn't. She looked at me with raised eyebrows, her head tipped to the left. Yes, you should. It's cold outside, so we won't be long. You'll be back in no time. Plus, you can help us with another question with the article. Perfect. She turned, darted over to her husband, and returned. Ready to go. We fell into step as we moved toward the front entrance. A few dozen yards later, Moo barked loudly. Jillian leapt in the air and landed a few feet away, a hand on her chest. Good gracious, he's loud. I looked, and sure enough, Karma was visible. Shh, Moo, no barking. Sorry about that. Moo's a bit freaked out by that big white yeti target over there. Jillian turned around to see Karma towering over the trade show floor. Oh, I imagine that's pretty terrifying to a dog. We walked out and grabbed her coat, then stepped into the crisp winter air. She took a deep breath. Feels nice to not be inside for a bit. Did you say you had more interview questions? I looked at Mary and nodded my head toward Jillian, urging Mary to ask the question while I gave Moo a long leash to sniff the small patch of grass. We're trying to get a feel for how this all works, so we have a hypothetical question. What would happen if a TV hunter said he was hunting on public but was really on private land? Jillian's eyebrows scrunched up and she frowned at Mary. What would happen? I volunteered. Like ramifications in the industry. Who'd be mad at him? How would it affect the show? That kind of thing. Jillian nodded. And this is a hypothetical situation? I jumped in, wanting to be accurate without revealing our thoughts about Cash's show. We were talking to Tony Moore at Real Outdoor Adventures, and the topic came up about shows misrepresenting a private hunt as a public hunt. We don't know enough to understand. Her eyes lit up when we mentioned Tony. Tony's great. He's our contact at the channel as well. So, hypothetically, she looked each of us in the eyes before continuing, it would depend on the exact details, because what he, or she, I suppose, did could be illegal. All the outdoor shows edit to put their best foot forward. But you were asking about flat out lying, right? Saying that the animal was shot in the national forest, but really it was shot miles away on a private land hunt? We nodded. It'd probably ruin the reputation if the news got out. Without knowing the exact situation, I'm just guessing. But this is the kind of thing that sends the industry into fits. Photoshopping, poaching, basically anything that doesn't fall under the category of honest, ethical sportsmanship can just kill a career. They'll lose their sponsors and time slot. It seems to be happening more and more, but it might just be that with the internet, these things are easier to discover and spread the word about. Why do people risk it? Mary wondered. Greed, I assume. People get away with it and figure that if it worked once, then they can do it again. But that's ridiculous. People usually notice but don't say anything. Sometimes we hear things, just that a deer is too good to be true for a certain location, or the story doesn't add up, that kind of thing. But I'm not going to risk my reputation accusing someone without proof. Actually, I'd never accuse anyone personally, but others will. I never want to get in the middle of a mud fight. Everyone gets dirty, even those in the right. I removed a blue plastic bag from Moo's backpack as he started his complicated potty dance. We moved farther away so he could carefully sniff each blade of grass while I kept my attention on the conversation. Geez, it's getting cold. Jillian looked over at Moo. After a few seconds, she continued. On top of everything else, it would be expensive. How so? Mary rubbed her arms with her hands and bounced lightly on the balls of her feet in the brisk air. We filmed some of our episodes on private land. We normally trade the hunt for publicity for the outfitters, the people that run the hunt. We might say, we're here at beautiful such-and-such ranch, where we are guided by the amazing so-and-so outfitters. We don't pay for the hunt, and they get a free commercial. But if you weren't going to advertise for them, then you would need to pay for the hunt. For 10 episodes, that could be quite a lot of money. Plus, the risk is huge that the outfitter would recognize the hunt and out you. I don't know how the situation could work out long term. It would cost a lot of money. Moo finished up his business and I threw away his mess, then joined them. Couldn't you use money from the sponsors to pay for the hunts? She shook her head. You need that money to pay for your time slot, editing, salary, and such, unless the person has a ton of money of their own to spend. But let me tell you, the money you get from companies is pretty tight. They have a very specific idea of what they're willing to pay, and it's virtually impossible to get them to budge. We couldn't get by on the TV money alone. Jack's a tax accountant, so he busts his butt from January to about May. That helps balance out the money we get from the show. We pulled the door open to the convention center and followed Jillian over to the coat check where she dropped off her jacket. We kept ours since we were in and out so frequently with Moo. She checked her watch and sighed. I better go back and find Jack and Vinny, but thanks for the break. You know, we have a hunt planned in Wyoming this year. Maybe we can swing by the center and grab a meal together. I grabbed one of Jess's cards from my pocket and handed it to her. We'd love to grab dinner, but also get in touch with Jess and through her Robbie, the director of the center. They're both looking for ways to promote the center. We exchanged hugs and headed in through a different entrance. 3 burly, bearded men stopped us as we entered the exhibit hall. Are you dying, Mary? Mary and I exchanged a surprised look before I turned back to the men. Yes, we are. Can I help you? The man chuckled. We're the 3 Billy brothers. Sarah told us that you want an interview for an article and to keep an eye out for the gigantic black and white dog. I'm tough, that's Buff, and he's gruff. We shook hands, weaving in and out until everyone had met. With a jolt, I realized I didn't know who was who. The one with the largest beard hooked a thumb over his shoulder. Do you have a few minutes? We're headed out tonight, and this is our only chance to talk. We exited and moved toward the tables near the food stands. People crisscrossed the area, balancing plates of food or mountains of brochures. A group of coworkers in matching shirts sat with their feet up on chairs. It was one of the few places at the trade show where you could sit and rest. Mary slipped me her phone and mouthed the words crime photos, then explained to the brothers what the article was about. We sat down and she started the interview. I pulled my chair back away from the table, out of the men's direct line of sight, and made a great show of patting Moo and not being involved in the interview. Mary started asking questions about individual roles in the show and the show in general. Quickly, their attention was on her. I opened the phone and tapped to the photos. Scanning past the photos of Orion, Moo, and herself that she had taken in the car this morning, I found the crime scene photos. There was Hannah crying on Lex's shoulder. and the handful of people behind Lex and Hannah, grabbing their pint glasses of beer, were the same 3 bearded men that sat in front of us now. I studied the pictures, looking for any other people I recognized. There was a tall gal that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place her. No one else in the pictures looked familiar. 2 older women, a couple of younger men, and 1 older man, but no one else that we had encountered so far. Unless they came up soon in the investigation, they could be ignored. Mary laughed loudly, startling me. I looked and she started talking again. I heard that a few years ago you switched time slots. What led to that decision? I held my breath as the men exchanged wary looks before the middle one turned back to us and answered, "It was a rebranding decision." "What?" I burst out. They turned to look at me. I thought... The man on the left answered, "There were a lot of rumors, but the truth is... Rebranding is the truth," the man on the right interrupted. The 2 men glared at each other until the man smacked a fist on the table. "Enough! Sarah said we could approve the article before it was published and that Mary would make us look good. I'm telling the truth." The 3 men exchanged looks before the 2 on the side nodded in agreement. "The truth is a little complicated. We've been doing the show for years and it was getting stale. We had this expensive time slot and each season we lost another sponsor until we were debating canceling the show." Mary scribbled a note. "We heard the time slot was stolen." He nodded. "We heard that too. The truth is that we were already talking to Tony about moving to a different, less expensive time slot. When Cash asked about our time slot and Tony called to check, we said to give it to him. A lot of people assumed that Cash stole it, and we didn't correct them, but the truth's that we never could have kept it. People can record shows and watch whenever they want. What's the point of paying an arm and a leg for a prime time slot anymore? That's what Denise thought." "Who's Denise?" Mary looked up from her notebook. The man on the left answered, "My daughter. She's the one that did an overhaul of the whole show. Got us on the internet, connecting with our fans, picked out nicknames, gave us each a personality and a role on the show to match. She revamped the entire show, and now we're the leading hunting show when it comes to social media presence and technology." He beamed with pride. That pretty much dashed their motive. "So you weren't mad at Cash?" The guy on the right answered, "Not for this. Don't get me wrong. That guy Moose, his agent or whatever you call it, is a real slime ball. And I didn't trust Cash farther than I could throw him. But we didn't have any personal beef with him. Never could figure out how Vinny could stand to work with him." Mary perked up. "Vinny? You don't mean the same Vinny that works with Jack and Jillian, do you?" The middle Billy brother answered, "Yeah, that's the same Vinny. He used to work with Cash." After Mary finished the interview, we said our goodbyes and headed back into the exhibit hall. "Well, Sherlock," I scratched behind Moo's ears, "I think we can cross them off the suspect list. What should we do now?" "We really need to hit the rest of the trade show. We're running out of time." "But there's 2 days left. We're not even halfway through the show." Mary shook her head. "Not really. Tomorrow's the last full day. The 4th day is a throwaway day, really. Only open until noon, then people tear down the booths and leave. It'll be almost empty that day. In fact, some people will pack up and leave tomorrow evening. Orion said we'll check out that morning and swing by the show only long enough to say goodbye. They need to drop us off in Wyoming, then get back to Utah, and they don't want to get home too late in the day." "Why didn't you tell me? I've been just wandering around thinking we have all the time in the world. We need to crank this investigation up to 11. Mary chuckled. "Okay, Watson, glad you found your investigational fortitude. Who's next?" My mind was racing. How did we waste so much time? Mary stopped chuckling and laid a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be upset. We had to learn about the whole industry. That's a lot." She dragged me off to the wall where 2 chairs were tucked behind a few potted plants. "Let's see what we have so far and plan out the investigation." As we sat down, I felt a little silly. "Hannah, suspect numero uno. She did it." "Oh, well, good. We're all done here. Let's just go tell Hannah to turn herself in." Mary flipped her notebook shut and went to stand. "Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue." Mary smirked and opened the notebook. We'll start with Hannah. She's acting weird, and as the wife, she's the number one suspect automatically. What are her motives? She could be having an affair. He could be having an affair. It could have been about money, or heck, all three. If what Jillian and Tony said is right, then he would be spending a lot of money to keep the show afloat. You know, the more I think about it, it really could be her. But she couldn't have lifted him over the wall next to the hallway. Maybe not just her alone, but she could have had help or something. Mary pulled her phone out and pulled up the pictures again. Lex is in the picture, and that tall gal from his booth. So maybe Lex and Hannah are having an affair and killed Cash. Or maybe Lex is in love with her and got Cash out of the picture so he could keep her to himself. Or maybe it's some weird love triangle. Or it could be someone that purposely didn't show up to find the body. Who else is on your list of suspects? She flipped a few pages. I have Moose. He had a falling out with Cash, according to Login, though he was still tight with Cash a few years ago, according to the Billy brothers. And Vinny. Why didn't Jillian say anything about Vinny working for Cash when we asked about the show? That's kind of suspicious. Anyone else? I nodded my agreement. It was suspicious. Moo laid his head in my lap and I rubbed his neck. Those are the only people I can think of right now, but maybe more suspects will show up. But you know I'm right. Hannah did it. Mary nodded. Okay, Watson, you made your point. If we track down Vinny and Moose today, then solve the murder tonight, you can spend all tomorrow walking the floor. Would that make you feel better? I felt a bit more relaxed to have a plan and ever-shortening list of suspects. Yes, it would. Thank you. Do you think that we can find the murderer tonight? Mary stood and started gathering up her bag. Maybe, but we can try. To be fair, the first two murders we solved were a lot easier, and even then we only solved the crime through dumb luck. Or smart luck, I countered. Are we going to use the article angle when we approach Vinny and Moose? Mary threw her messenger bag over her shoulder, then shrugged. It's worked so far. Let's see if Logan can introduce us to Moose. We headed toward the Westmound booth when Moo pulled at the leash and barked. Sure enough, I was lost in thought of murder and mayhem and hadn't noticed we were near Karma again. That danged yeti, I swear. Shh, Moo. Eyes swiveled around at Moo's barking, and Mike, from the booth, chuckled and came over. I guess Moo still has some strong feelings about Karma, eh? Have you been a bad dog? Is Karma gonna get you? We asked how his day went and made idle chit-chat for a few minutes while Moo growled and huffed at the 30-foot-tall enemy. Mike offered the back of his hand to Moo to sniff, but Moo leaned around Mike to keep his eyes on Karma. Don't worry, Moo. Karma will be gone tomorrow afternoon. Oh, isn't that a day early? I asked. Yep, but you would be surprised how difficult it is to move Karma around, and the best price required us taking her out a day early. But it's okay. Everyone's seen her by now. He turned around and grabbed some papers off a table. Here's a few flyers for our event. He grabbed a pen and wrote on the flyer. There's my email. Bring your whole crew and let me know if you have any problems getting to hotel rooms. Thanks. I'll give this to Jess. She runs the archery part of the training center and plans our tournament schedule. I passed one flyer to Mary and stuck the other in my pocket. We headed down the row, past the Westmound booth, and across the aisle to Anderson Archery. Hey, Moo. Logan came up, greeting Moo first by taking a knee and ruffling Moo's gigantic ears. How's the murder investigation going? I hushed him. Don't say that so loudly. We're trying to be discreet. I looked around for spying eyes. Could you introduce us to Moose? He rolled his eyes. That guy. Wait till you meet him. His ego is the size of a house. He wanted to meet you guys too. Something about an article and how he was going to explain how things really work. I think he's trying to get in good with Liam and figures die is the key to that. My cheeks flared hot and I avoided eye contact. No idea why he would think that. Logan let out a loud laugh. Sure, keep telling yourself that. But what's this about an article? Mary hitched her bag to the other shoulder. Sarah from the OIT show asked us to write an article on the hunting shows and... She leaned in and lowered her voice. It's a great cover for investigation. Smart. Oh, hey, did you recommend me to Orion for a new project? Huh? The lack of sleep was muddling my brain. Something about tracking sponsorship? Orion wants to work with me to start it or something. Oh, yeah. Orion and Liam wanted to see if there was a way for them to know what archers and shooters were supported by which company without having to call each company individually. I made a few suggestions and thought that you might be a good person to try out whatever we come up with. I'm sorry, I probably should have asked you before I volunteered you. It hadn't occurred to me until now that Logan might not want to be volunteered, though really my loyalty was to Liam and through him Westmound. No, thank you for suggesting me. The opportunity to work with Orion directly is awesome. He's like the man. Give me a second and let my boss know I'm helping you real quick. Then we can go find Moose. I leaned over to Mary. I'm so spoiled. I forget that Liam and Orion are kind of a big deal in this industry. Mary chuckled. Heck, sometimes you forget that I'm a big deal. I could never forget that. Mary had been a top-ranked female recurve archer heading into the Summer Games trials tournaments when her mother's health scare had derailed her. She took some time off after that, but had been back training for a few months. I'm lucky to shoot with you. You're a great influence. And you're a quick learner. Plus, you're in the best possible place to train. And once we get home, you're going to have the most awesome equipment ever. That makes me a bit nervous. What if I can't live up to the equipment? You will, and don't worry. It's one of the perks of working where you do. If you had crappy equipment, it would be worse. You're representing the Westmound brand, and you need to look the part. I shifted my feet. I loved the brand new bow and couldn't wait to get it set up. Tournament season started in a few weeks. I was excited and terrified. What if people point and say, she sucks, why does she have such nice stuff? Screw them. What do you care what others think of you? I know that you'll be great, and there's no point in disadvantaging yourself just because of what others might think. You're so smart. She was in her early 20s, but her head was firmly on her shoulder, and her competitive experience gave her solid wisdom on many topics. She gave me a smile. I know. You really should listen to me more. Logan jogged back over. All set. I saw Moose this morning, and he mentioned a few places he might be today. He was angling for a meeting with Orion, but Orion and the whole Westmount Anderson crew are booked with meetings all week. Or so they told him. Logan dodged and weaved his way through the crowd on long legs. Mary and I struggled to keep up as he talked. Connie's in charge of their schedule, and she turned everyone down. So then they came over to our booth to see if someone can sneak them in. I can't tell you how many of these hunting personalities tried to convince me that they need to have a meeting with Orion or Liam. Like I have that kind of pull. There he is. Logan stopped and I ran into his back. Sorry, where? Logan turned and started walking down an aisle and in front of a booth of camouflage tents and hunting blinds. Hey, Moose. Moose barreled over and extended his hand. Hi, Moose. You must be Di, Mary. I figured you'd want to talk to me for your article. Thanks, Logan. Chapter 7. Logan said his goodbyes, leaving us standing awkwardly in front of Moose. He was not just exceedingly tall, but stood so close that there was no way to look him in the eye other than to crane my head backwards like I was observing the clouds or Superman overhead. A prickle of unease moved down my spine. I had always considered Moose a benevolent creature, but at home there had been a rash of moose attacks. A lady had been walking her dogs when one ran up behind her and, as she turned, headbutted her. I looked at Moose warily. We're hoping to chat with you somewhere. Maybe we can find a table to sit at? I stepped back into the aisle between booths and looked toward the walls where we had found chairs and tables before. No, we're cool. Come on. There's a table in here we can use. Walking further into the booth, Moose kicked one of the booth employees out of a chair. Mary and I exchanged an uneasy look. Mary pulled out her notebook, flipping to a clean page. Are you sure? There are plenty of empty spots to sit. No, here's fine. He sat down, stretching his legs out underneath the table. The only way to avoid straddling his feet was to pull the chair far away from the table. Mary balanced the notebook in her lap. Tell me about what you do. I'm sure Liam told you all about me. He adjusted the baseball hat on his head and tipped his chin up in the air. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes at him. We want the most accurate information possible for the article. It's always best to get it directly from the horse's mouth. He winked at me. Smart. I'm a deal maker. I work with a variety of companies, he gestured around the booth, as well as archers and shooters to set up sponsorship or buyout, or sometimes I do some headhunting. Basically, if you need something done in this industry, you need me. He launched into a series of stories about the people he was good friends with that relied on his insight to be successful. Unfortunately, none of them were people I knew, and name-dropping was lost on me. I deliberately kept eye contact when he looked at me and tried to nod and say, "Oh?" at the appropriate times. Minutes stretched on, but he continued to talk. I could see Mary's notebook, and her notes had been replaced with a row of hearts and drawings of various bow. The archery kind, of course. Moose droned on. I have a close connection with anyone who's anyone, though I have to say, I haven't had too much contact with the Westmound Anderson office. Maybe we should get together soon. I'm sure I could help them. I bit my tongue from sharing my immediate thought. He continued. Mary, I'm just starting to expand into recurve archers. You should have me represent you. Mary's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked at me. I stalled for time before I came up with a solution. You know, because of our job at the Westmound Training Center, we don't really have a lot of freedom right now with sponsorships. Ah, good point. He pulled out cards and handed one to each of us. In case you ever need help. Is it true that the center is opening up spots for compound shooters to train at the facility? Mary nodded. Yep, they just approved 2 recurve OSAs, tiger and minks, and 1 weekend gal. Jess is planning on opening up to the compound application sometime soon. I have a few shooters that might be interested. Since I'm helping you out, you can put in a good word for them. I'll let you know when they apply. I wasn't convinced that listening to him brag for what felt like a century really qualified as us owing him anything, but I nodded back. After pulling a card from my pocket, I passed it over. This is Jess's card. She will be making the final decision. So I heard you worked with Cash on his hunting show. Moose grunted and crossed his arms. I used to. I brought him into this industry and took care of him. And how does he repay me? By screwing me over. He grumbled and muttered obscenities under his breath. Oh no, what happened? Mary looked up from her drawing of a cartoon dog. He's just a tool and an unappreciative. He cut himself off and looked away with a frown. It surprised me that he seemed genuinely wounded. Maybe all that bluster hid some insecurities. Did you know Hannah at all? His eyes brightened, then he smoothed his face of any emotion. Yes, I knew her as well. I also told Cass that she should be on the show. It helps to have some eye candy around. Why didn't Cash do that? He tried, but she refused. No idea why. She was a beauty queen, Miss Kentucky or Carolina or something, and a professional cheerleader, but she insisted she was too shy to be on TV. I tried to convince her to do it, but I never could. She was a bit weird sometimes. Mary leaned forward a bit. How so? She refused to have anything about her online or in the show. She wasn't a fan of the show. She seemed okay with it when we began, but less so right around the time I stopped working with them. Hey, Panther! The last bit he yelled out, causing Moo to leap to his feet. Glad I could help you both with this article, but I need to go talk to someone. He ran over and fell into step next to a guy while we left the booth the opposite way. Mary walked on the opposite side of Moo. Keep an eye out for Vinny. I don't know if that was all that helpful to talk with Moose. And now he thinks we owe him a favor. That's just great. But we can't eliminate him from the suspect list. Mary turned right at the end of the booth and craned her head around, looking each way before continuing. If he's the murderer, it'd be convenient. We never have to pay back this imaginary favor. He's huge. He could have picked up Cash single-handed and dropped him on the floor below. Plus, he likes Hannah. Or maybe he killed Cash to get to Hannah. Or they're having an affair and he did it for her. True. Do you think he did it? I darted around a man in camo standing in the aisle. I'm not convinced. Nothing he said really stuck out as a great motive or murderous rage. Over there. I pointed several booths over. Is that Jillian? Yes, perfect. Mary raced off with me on her heels. Jillian and Vinny were talking quickly in a booth, pointing at tree stands. They pointed at one, then the other. Jillian lifted one and shook her head before placing it down. As we approached, Jillian looked up and smiled. Again? How many questions do you have? Actually, we were hoping to talk to your videographer, Vinny. Mary smiled back. Oh, we're pretty busy right now. Vinny cut her off. No problem. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Mary escorted Vinny out of the exhibit hall and back to the food court. From this distance, booths were just barely visible. Once we were all settled in, she asked him about his job. I do everything related to filming, not just handling the camera. I have to make sure the sound is right, we've all the shots we need, and they're good enough. Then I edit together the episode and get the finished episode to the network. I help Jack and Jillian with each segment, and I'm also another set of eyes to evaluate creative decisions. Mary took notes. How long have you worked with them? This will be our 3rd season working together. Jack's brother used to do my job, but his production company was growing, and it was getting harder and harder to pick up and leave for all of hunting season. I had met Jack and Jillian on a few different occasions, and when they said they were looking for a new camera guy, we talked about it and gave it a shot. So who did you work for before Jack and Jillian? Vinny shrugged. I've been doing this for 16 years. I've worked with and for a lot of people on a lot of projects. Mary tapped her pen on her notebook a few times. The silence stretched out. Isn't it true that you worked for Hunting with Cash before leaving under mysterious circumstances? Vinny rocked back in his chair. What the? I thought this was an article. Is this some kind of expose? I chuckled and tried to lessen his panic. This part isn't for the article. We're trying to figure out what the deal is with Cash. There was something fishy going on, and we thought you might know. No one has details. We tried talking to Logan, Jillian, Tony, basically everyone, but no one can tell us what really happened. He looked at me with narrow eyes and back at Mary. You work for Westmound, right? You swear this isn't going in the article? Mary shoved her notebook in her bag and waved her hand across her chest. I cross my heart. This isn't for the article. Fine, but if you repeat this, I will deny it up and down. Cash always wanted to cut corners and was a little too slick for my taste. I was already looking around for a new job while editing the last season we did together. We had done a normal season of public land hunts. Then we had filmed a fancy guided hunt on private land. He said it was just for his own records. Then he said maybe it would be bonus footage, or he would try to do a special episode. The story kept changing. But when I started editing, he had this idea to start mixing footage for a better, more engaging episode. That was the final straw. We had been butting heads all season, so I left. What happened after that? Mary leaned forward on her chair. I don't know. I don't watch the season or want to. I just slid out of the scene. Most people forgot I worked for him, and I prefer it that way. Maybe Vinny wanted to shut up Cash permanently. When did you guys get to the OIT show? First thing this morning. We left at 2 a.m. and drove straight through to make the meeting with Liam and Orion. Vinny said it matter-of-factly with no hesitation. He looked around and spied Jack and Jillian and waved them over. I don't want to say anything in front of them. They're of the speak no evil variety and hate gossip. Jillian held up her index finger to indicate there would be a second, and she and her husband finished talking to a salesman at the booth. This was our only chance to talk to someone who knew Cash and seemed willing to talk. What's Hannah like? Oh, she's a flirt. I heard she was some kind of cheerleading beauty queen, but found it kind of gross the way she would bat her eyes at sponsors to get more free product. She never did it with me, though, so I was thankful for that. I've been happily married for 12 years. She always wanted to be the center of attention, but would claim she was camera shy whenever we wanted to take her picture. Jack and Jillian were exchanging cards with the salesman. I pushed ahead. What about Moose? He rolled his eyes. That dude's ego is enormous. Hannah had him wrapped around her finger, but then he had some fight with Cash about something stupid, a hunt they were planning or sponsorship that Cash didn't think was worth it, and Moose stormed off. And Lex? At the booth, Jack was shaking hands and turned toward us. Who? Bald guy, has some booth with hunting products. The words tumbled out of my mouth. Oh, yeah. He wasn't involved with Cash when I worked with him. We all done here? Jack and Jillian joined us. Mary turned to them. Hey, guys, we got everything we need for the article. I hear you had an early morning. Jillian narrowed her eyes, but Jack chuckled. Yes, we did. Left at 2 a.m. exactly. I can't wait to crash at the hotel tonight. Thanks for chatting with us. We'll see you around. They left and Mary pulled her notebook out with a sigh. This article is going to need to make everyone look really good to make up for how annoyed they are with us. That's up to you, my friend. I work with computers for a reason. I clasped my hands on my stomach and extended my legs, rolling my ankles one at a time, then stifled a yawn. So, Vinny, Jillian, and Jack are off our suspect list? I guess, said Mary. I mean, we can't prove that they didn't fake their alibi ahead of time, but I'm putting Moose back on the list. Maybe he was pining away from Hannah and wanted us to interview him just to throw us off. Or they were having an affair for years, but at least we have confirmation of what we suspected. Cash was definitely editing footage to make his show look better. But I'm not sure what it means beyond him being a massive liar and spending a ton of money to do it. Who do you want to interview next? Ideally, I should talk to Hannah. She's suspect number 1, but I'm not even sure how we would approach her. The article angle isn't going to work. And after you almost ripped her throat out for touching Liam, I doubt we could try the concerned friend approach. I cleared my throat. Sorry about that. I stared off into the distance at the people starting to stream out of the exhibit hall. What time is it? The show closes for the day in 15 minutes. Mary followed my glance, then gasped. Look, there's Hannah. Hannah was exiting the exhibit hall, clinging to Lex's arm. They moved at the front door and headed toward a line of buses that shuttled people back to the hotels in the evening. I turned to Mary. Well, well, well. Interesting. Sitting in our suite back at the hotel, I was so tired I couldn't imagine how I was going to get off the couch and go to dinner. I had sat down after I showered and changed, and hadn't moved since. Liam came into the room, rubbing a hand through his hair and sending up a fine spray of water. He sat next to me, a subtle scent of soap and spices wafting over. You look beat. Do you want to stay in tonight? Oh, I don't want to ruin everyone's plans. I didn't want to go, but shouldn't I at least attempt to be a good sport? No worries. We can order in or something. If Orion and Mary want to go with John and Mom, they can. They don't really need us. Did I hear my name? Mary exited our room. She was combing her thick, wet, black hair. I flopped my feet onto the coffee table and slid down further on the couch. We were discussing the idea of staying in tonight, but I don't want to ruin everyone's plans. If we stay in, we could start that article for Sarah. She cleared her throat. A pink flush rose in her cheeks. Orion going? Orion popped his head out of the bedroom. Going where? Liam stretched his hands overhead. The 3 of us were debating staying in and having room service instead of going out. Count me in on that. Orion disappeared back into his room. Mary went over to the small table and pulled out her computer and notebook. Within a minute, she was tapping away at the computer. Moo crawled up on the couch next to me, his head on my lap. He had already eaten and would be thrilled with the idea of staying in. Liam grabbed the TV remote off the coffee table. After flipping through the stations, he settled on a show about huge fish. I never see this show at home, but I swear every time I travel there's a marathon running. After several more episodes of the fish show, and the food had arrived, I was still exhausted but content. Elizabeth had gone to dinner with John, but the rest of us had stayed in and ordered room service. Moo was asleep in my lap. Orion had pulled over a chair and exchanged quips with Liam about the show. Mary had typed away at the table, occasionally asking me for clarifications when her notes got too messy. I was tempted to nap, but didn't want to miss a single second of the easy joking in the room. I was pleased in a way that I hadn't felt in ever. I couldn't think of a time when I had been so at ease. Mary closed the lid of her laptop. First draft is done. I'll give it a look over before I submit it. Are you still watching that show about fish in the Amazon? Orion peeled his eyes off the screen. Nah, that was the last episode. Now he's fishing for killer stingrays. Pull up a chair and learn about the evil that lurks beneath. Mary giggled and started to drag her chair over, then stopped. Oh, drat! Di and I were supposed to do some investigating tonight. I waved a hand at her. Don't worry about it. I bet Sherlock and Watson took some time off after a long day. Sit. Enjoy the show. Didn't Sherlock take cocaine or something? Mary pulled her chair over next to Orion. I think that is out of the cards for us. Television shall be our drug. What is it, Moo? He had woken up and was pawing at my leg. Do you need to go outside? Moo sprang from my lap and raced to the door. I guess that answers that. Mary reluctantly stood up. I'll go with you. Liam stood. No, you just finished working. I'll go with Di. He grabbed his coat and clipped the leash onto Moo's harness while I grabbed my shoes and jacket. Mary sat down. So what is this show about? She asked Orion. Liam, Moo, and I slipped out the door. Thanks for going with me to walk Moo. He's my dog. He gave me a smile as we waited for the elevator. Only technically, I consider Moo my dog. I hitched my chin up defiantly. What about if he's our dog? How was your day? As we rode down in the elevator and took Moo outside, I gave him a summary of our day, including the investigation. He listened and nodded at the right times and gave me every ounce of his attention. We walked in laps around the ground floor until I had shared every bit of information and Moo was dragging behind us. The police tape was gone from the crime scene, and I would have never guessed a man had died here 2 nights ago. What do you have left to investigate? Liam asked. I'm not really sure. I really think Hannah did it, but we don't know how or if she did it alone. We had turned the corner by the bar and headed for the front desk again when a voice called out. Hey, guys! The words were slurred and drawn out. I turned and spotted Candy wobbling out of the bar toward us. I nodded at her. Hey, Candy, how are you doing? She was thinner than the last time I saw her. The ribs above her breast created deep ripples like a washboard from her collarbone down. Her makeup wasn't as heavy as before, but was far sloppier. Her eyeliner was uneven, one cat's eyes going up while the other went down, and it was smeared on the left side. Foundation made orangey lines in the wrinkles of her neck. Clumps of black mascara were in the inside corners of her eyes. Her hands twitched and moved with a life of her own as she rambled. I'm doing great, haha! But I would be better if Liam let me buy back candy-covered products. You should do that, Liam, or Westmound, or whoever makes that decision. What do you think? That'd be great, huh? It all came out in one breath, the words tumbling out as one long word without pauses between them. She stopped to empty her sloshing glass all at once before continuing. Hey, you guys should have a drink with us. We're hanging out and having a great time. You could have a drink or buy me one, and we could discuss selling me candy covered. Wouldn't that be fun? She grabbed Liam's hand and pulled. When he didn't move, she slipped and stumbled back a few steps. I moved in closer to Liam and tried to distract Candy. Sorry, Candy, we have to get up early. Plus, we have Moo with us. Moo! Hi, buddy! She leaned over and shoved her hand into his face before I could stop her. Moo danced out of her reach behind us. Her behavior made me uneasy, but perhaps she had some information for us. Hey, did you hear about Cash dying? Poor Hannah. Candy stood up quickly and took a stumbling step to the left. I did. Can you believe it? Cold worked for them and told me all about them. Cash was so in debt. He spent all his money from selling his business on the show, which is totally the opposite of how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to make money, not lose it. I heard that Cash got a huge loan to cover the upcoming season and to get a better time slot. I thought that was hilarious. Cash had no cash. She laughed at her own joke while my brain caught up with what my ears heard. She was talking so quickly. I wish we had been here to see it. I've never seen a dead body, but we were at the concert. Cold filmed it and I helped. We're going to start doing all the stuff together and I'll be on screen and be the face of archery and it's going to be awesome. I'll be at all your tournaments. I can cheer you on. Woohoo! Hey, are you sure you don't want a drink? I am so thirsty. She turned and tottered off to the bar, her ankles bending and twisting. It was surprising that she didn't tip over. Whoa, Liam said next to me. I couldn't help but laugh. That was like a tornado. She appeared and disappeared so quickly, I barely caught my breath. Liam started walking again. Is this how you investigate a murder? You walk around and people give you all the information you want? It's smart luck. A lot of times the best clues come from people that don't realize they're clues. Like Candy telling us that Cash and Hannah were in debt because of the show. Hey, Becky's working at the front desk. You stay here. I'm going to see if she has anything useful. Sure thing, but have you seen the time? He held out his wrist. I grabbed his wrist in my hand, his warm skin soft under my fingers. After a few distracted seconds, I noticed the time. It was late. Geez, so much for an early night and catching up on sleep. I'll be quick. I bounded over to Becky with the biggest, friendliest smile. How are you doing tonight, Becky? She looked up from her computer. Hi, doing much better. Things are pretty much back to normal. I saw that the police tape was down. Is everything done? So they say. They packed up everything earlier and said we are free to repaint. I leaned in closer. Repaint what? On the top floor, there were some scratches in the wall. I think that's where... did you need something? Oh no, I stepped back and moved back to Liam. Just wanted to say hi before we head to bed. Night! I sped back to Liam. I wondered if Watson had a sidekick that helped him when Sherlock was busy watching fish shows. If he didn't, then he should, because Liam would make a great sidekick with his quiet manner and wicked smile. We have a clue to investigate. To the top floor! We raced to the elevator. Liam pressed the button. Then we can call it a night? Absolutely. I'm about to tip over. But it was fun to walk Moo around, and I've barely seen you since we got here. I know. This show is always crazy. Orion and I juggled some meetings. We were hoping that tomorrow afternoon we can walk around with you and Mary. Really? That would be so fun. We smiled at each other as the elevator stopped at the top floor. You might change your mind about that. Usually we get stopped by a ton of people that want to talk business, but at least you can learn a lot. And hanging out with you guys is way more fun than sitting in a meeting for the entire show. What did you want to see up here? I turned down the hallway the opposite way from our suite and walked toward the far corner directly above where we had found the body several nights earlier. It's over here. Becky said the police were gone and they could repaint. They must have figured out where Cash was dropped from. We followed the hallway around, the half wall completely blocking my view of anything except the roof of the hotel. Can you see over the wall? A little. How could Hannah have gotten Cash over this? That's our question. We figured that she had help, if she did it. I stopped in front of the corner, facing the half wall that Cash would need to be lifted over. To the right of the corner was smooth wall. I moved around to the left and found scratches. Look! There was a long scratch on the pale green paint parallel to the ground. exposing the white drywall underneath. I laid my arm along to measure, then ran the tip of my finger to my elbow. Using my arm again, I measured the height of the marks to be off the ground as they were long. Roughly in the middle, a second fainter line ran perpendicular up the wall. It was not as deep as the lower scratch and slowly got shallower until it stopped. I snapped a picture with my phone. The paint on the area to the left was lighter and discolored. I looked around and saw nothing. "What are you looking for?" Liam whispered as he watched me inspect everything. What if Hannah did it alone and had something to help her lift Cash over the edge? These marks could show that she used to move him and then push him over the wall. These marks, I pointed at the parallel marks, could be getting the body up next to the wall, then these other ones could be raising the body. Or luggage or a drunk guy falling. "Oh, don't be a stick in the mud," I teased him. He responded with a smile. "None of this is proof, and you're right, it could be nothing. Or," I turned to him and raised my eyebrows, "it could be proof of murder." I ran my hand over the scratches again. Moo shoved his nose into my hand and I rubbed his neck. But what would make them? Something that rolled and lifted? Scissor lift? "Are those things at construction sites?" He nodded. "I guess so, but where would you get one?" I thought a bit longer, but nothing came to mind. "Okay, you win. Bedtime?" We headed down the hallway while I stifled a yawn. I loved having Liam all to myself, though technically it was the three of us, Moo, Liam, and I. I hated to go to bed, but I was running on empty. Liam opened the door to our suite slowly and closed it quietly behind us. The lights were out except a table lamp and the TV. Mary and Orion were on the couch, which they had pulled around up close to the TV. They swiveled their heads to look at us over the top of the couch. Mary held an index finger to her pursed lips and pointed it at Elizabeth's closed door. When I was closer, she whispered, "Elizabeth went to bed a while ago." She got up, and Liam and Orion carefully moved the couch back to its proper spot, and we all went to bed. I was asleep before Mary turned out her light. Chapter 8. A shove to the center of my back woke me up a split second before the blanket slipped off and the bed disappeared beneath me. I broke the fall onto the hotel room floor with my face. A second later, there was a thump from the other side of the room that vibrated the floor, then a groan. I was still trying to figure out what had happened when there was a single knock and the bedroom door creaked open. "Is everything okay?" Liam asked in a whisper. I sat up and ran a hand over the bedside table, knocking my phone onto the ground and a glass of water onto myself before turning on the lamp. In the doorway stood Liam, with Orion slightly behind him. They both were in baggy, lightweight gym shorts that hung past their knees and no shirts. Wow. Mary squealed and snatched a pillow off the bed to cover herself. Moo was stretched out across the middle of the bed. His back paws hung over on my side, and his front paws were in the front of Mary as she faced the door of the bedroom. Liam chuckled, the tension draining from his face. "Did Moo shove you out of the bed?" "I think so." A gun was in his right hand, dangling by his side. "Did you seriously bring a gun? What did you think happened?" "You never know." Orion leaned around Liam. "If you guys are okay, I'm going back to bed." Mary nodded, and I answered, "I think we're fine. Liam, did you have that gun all week?" He looked at me. "Never ask what a man has in his pants." My cheeks burned red. He chuckled and closed the door. A few seconds later, I heard another door softly close. Mary scrambled off the floor. "Holy cow, what a way to wake up!" I figured she meant falling out of bed, but the way she was staring at the door made me wonder. Moo woke up and looked around. When he spotted me on the floor, he hopped off the bed and shoved his nose in my eye. I grabbed my phone off the floor and checked the time. "We've only been asleep for a few hours." "I'm totally awake now." She got up and went into the bathroom while I petted Moo. He pawed at me and whined. When Mary returned from the bathroom, I told her, "I think Moo needs to go outside." I had on adorable Great Dane PJs that Mary had given me for Christmas. while she had on the set I gave her, covered in bows and arrows. I debated putting on real clothing, but exhaustion won, and I pulled on shoes and a jacket. I'll be right back. No, you're not going alone. Mary grabbed her jacket and shoes. I hesitated. Are you sure? She grabbed a key off the table. We're a team, and it's the middle of the night. Plus, you can tell me why you and Liam were gone so long. We snuck out of the suite, carefully closing the door behind us. We went downstairs, past the closed bar, and let Moo outside while I caught her up. When we got upstairs, we made a quick trip over to the scratches for her to see them herself and take a few pictures. We snuck back into the suite, finishing Moo's bathroom run in record time. Moo jumped back onto the bed, and we ditched our jackets and shoes. Crawling into bed, we flipped off the lights. The adrenaline was gone, and though I was exhausted, I couldn't get comfortable. I flipped the pillow again and rolled onto my side. Di? Sorry, am I keeping you awake? No, I want to tell you something. I flipped back toward her side of the bed. Sure. Out of the darkness, Mary said, I think I'm going to marry Orion. Excuse me? I sat straight up and turned on the lamp. Marry Orion. She blinked at the light. I heard that part. Don't you think this is a bit of a jump? You haven't even been on a date, and he's like 10 years older than you. I was mostly being dramatic to get your attention, but kinda not. My mom knew when she met my dad that she would marry him. I'm not totally convinced yet, but I think it's worth exploring. Both of our grandfathers are pastors, and we love archery. Did you know he set up our bows for us, and they're perfect? A decade difference isn't that much. You and I are best friends, and we're almost 10 years apart. I was at a loss for words. She barely knew him, and he was so much older. They lived hours apart. Being able to set up a bow wasn't normally on a list of marriage qualities. Then I stopped. Who was I to judge? She wasn't asking my permission, and why did I think she was? Okay. Okay? She arched an eyebrow at me. Tell me more. You're not going to convince me I'm wrong? Do you want me to? No, I don't, but this is my plan. What I know so far about him is perfect. We're both Christian, which is important. He values family. We work in the same industry and love the same lifestyle. We laugh at the same things. So far, so good. That seems realistic so far. So you're not thinking that you'll get married tomorrow. Don't be ridiculous. That's not how things work. She rolled her eyes at me like I was the one jumping the gun. I haven't dated a lot. I've never had a real boyfriend. But Orion's really special. Even if we aren't talking, just being around him makes me happy. I thought about Liam, how I felt just seeing him across the room. I know what you mean. Any more bombshells you want to drop tonight? She chuckled. No, I wanted to tell someone. I'm glad you told me. I turned off the lamp and settled onto my pillow. Don't tell anyone. I know it sounds crazy. What I said. Who would I tell? I pulled the sheets up over my shoulder and settled in. Liam. You can't tell Liam or anyone. I mean it. Don't worry. I yawned widely in the dark. I won't. Besides, Liam and I have a whole mess of things we need to iron out before we go meddling in other people's relationships. The next morning, I raced around the room trying to get ready. When there was a knock on the door, I called out, "Come in!" Liam opened the door. "Breakfast here." Whoa. Mary had pants on but was face down on the bed with her PJ top still on, her feet hanging off the end of the bed. I had managed to put on a shirt but had forgotten to change out of my PJ bottoms before putting on my boots. We have a problem. I can't get Moo out of bed. When I had tried to convince him, Moo had whined and moaned. We had tried shoving him, but he went totally limp. Turns out that if a Great Dane doesn't want to move off the middle of a rather soft king-size bed, you need more than 2 strong women to force him. Maybe the 3 of you should sleep in. I sat down and pulled off my boots. No, we'll be fine, just moving a little slow. Do you realize that you only have makeup on half your face? I felt my face. I'd been putting on eye makeup when I realized I was still wearing pajama bottoms, so I went to get my pants, and Mary and I bumped into each other. She had landed on the bed and was still there. I guess I'd never gotten back to my makeup. I'm so tired. I felt 1,000,000 years old. Go to bed, sleep in. When you guys are ready, take the bus over or call Jack and have him pick you up. I got up and shut the blinds. Are you sure? I crawled into bed and pulled the covers over my shoulder. Liam laughed, called to Moo, and closed the door behind them. When I woke up later, I felt human again. Moo was moving around on the bed, jostling me awake. Mary yawned, her arms peeking over the top of Moo's back, then she sat up. Geez, oh Pete, we're late. We're so late. It's okay, Liam said to sleep in. I stretched at the edge of the bed. But Orion said they were going to make time to hang out with us today. I don't want to miss that. We bustled around the room, throwing on clothing, grabbing our stuff, and finishing the makeup I had started earlier. We burst out the door. I headed for the elevator, but Mary tugged me the opposite way. Let's check out the scratches again. It'll only take a second. I checked my watch again and silently thanked Liam for feeding Moo and taking him out before they all left. Liam had left me a note, which was helpful because Moo did his darndest to convince me that he needed breakfast when we woke up. The buses ran for another 25 minutes. The scratches were gone, and in their place was a wet paint sign. Good thing we stopped by last night, I said when Mary's face fell. The door behind us clicked open, and I turned to see the tall gal from Lex's booth and the night we had found Cash's body. Excuse me, I grabbed Mary's arm to go. No, wait, can I pet your dog? I stopped and hesitated. We really need to run. We have to catch the bus. She pulled the door shut behind her. To the OIT show, right? Me too. She fell into step next to me and smiled. My name's Andrea, but you can call me Dre. I've seen you guys around and have been dying to say hi and meet your dog. I love dogs. We introduced ourselves as we walked to the elevator. She knelt next to Moo, and he leaned on her with his eyes closed as she petted him. Aren't you just the handsomest dog ever? What's his name? Moo, Mary said. Moo, how hilarious! Then the elevators dinged. She stood up and wiped her hand off on her pants while Mary and I exchanged a look. So is that your hotel room? Mary smiled at Dre. No, the room belongs to my boss, Lex Lutherson of Lex's Hunting Solutions. He went in early today and needed me to grab some extra receipt books from his room. She leaned over to scratch Moo's head. I made eye contact with Mary, and we nodded at each other. Lex's room was directly over the murder site. How perfect was this? Dre walked next to us as we exited the elevator. You guys were there when they found the body. How awful was that? I shook my head as we stepped through the lobby to the entrance where we could see the bus pick up. Just awful. Thankfully, Lex was there to comfort Hannah. Hannah. Dre's eyes narrowed as she spit out the word. She looked at us, then down at the ground. I'm sorry. She's a widow and all, but... She raised her left hand to tuck some hair behind her ear, and a huge diamond ring caught the light. Wow, that's a gorgeous ring. I caught her hand to see it closer. Oh, sorry. I let go. No, please. This is the first time I get to show it off. She held her hand out and we oohed and awed. The bus pulled up and we rushed out through the cold to hop aboard. Dre sat across the aisle from us and petted Moo as he stood between us. She was looking at me, and it felt awkward just sitting there, so I asked her more about the ring. First day to show it off, eh? Does that mean you got engaged last night? She was eager to talk, but we were going to keep it quiet. She trailed off and looked into the distance before looking back at us. Oh, who cares? Everyone's going to know. Lex and I are engaged! She squealed loudly. Lex? I squeaked. I saw him with... She narrowed her eyes. Hannah, right? That's why I'm wearing the ring today. She crossed her arms. Mary shook her head. I'm so confused. Dre fixed the ring on her finger. We've been dating for a while, but we're keeping it secret because we work together. But the night before the show started, Lex asked me to marry him. We decided to wait until we got home and could tell the company first. The bus bumped along, empty except for the three of us and Moo, who laid down on the seat a row ahead of us. Makes sense. Totally, but Hannah has been all over Lex, even before Cash died. Yesterday, she had this big meltdown in our booth, and Lex, being a gentleman and a bit naive, offered to take her back to the hotel while I closed up. When I get back, I go to his room, and she's crying on his shoulder with several of her buttons undone. I tell her to get away from my fiancé. Lex tells me to calm down. Nothing was happening, but let me tell you what. Hannah changed after that. Those fake tears dried right up, and I got the room key away from her before she could blink. I raised my hand. Hannah had a key to Lex's room? Dre nodded. Cash bought some stuff from Lex as part of the sponsorship deal, so Lex gave them an extra room key to go pick it up, but then Cash disappeared. Later, well, you were there, we found him dead. Mary, who was sitting between me and the window, pushed me back a little so she could see Dre. What happened after you told Hannah to give you back the key and get away from Lex? That little sneak changed tacks. She wanted a refund on the stuff that Cash had bought. Lex said he would cut her a check and give it to her. She wanted it right then, but it just wasn't possible. Then I kicked her out of the room. Then Lex and I stayed up late discussing stuff and decided that keeping things secret wasn't a good idea. I slept in this morning, but Lex took all the stuff that she had bought over to the show first thing this morning. Do you want to see pictures of when he proposed? His best friend knew and took pictures. We agreed, and she pulled out her phone. Flipping through the pictures, she told us the whole story. This is in the bar. Then Lex said we forgot something in the car. This is us going outside. Then when we got to the car, this is him throwing me a box. I couldn't believe it when I opened it. I cried. And here he is showing me that he got pictures. She was beaming. I couldn't help smiling at her, though this pretty well removed Lex as a suspect. Then what happened? We talked about it and decided not to tell anyone yet. We came back and everyone was leaving the bar because they heard a scream. We joined them and you know the rest. We found Cash and Lex helped Hannah until the police came. Then we talked to the police. How did you guys get out of talking to the police? We boogied on out of there. When we arrived, they were already investigating what the big noise was. We had nothing to add. I explained as the bus pulled up to the OIT show. We got out of the bus and Dre wrapped me in a hug. Thank you so much. It was so fun to tell someone the story. Please come with me to the booth. I want you to meet Lex. Oh, okay. We need to walk Moo a little bit, then check in. She wrapped Mary in a hug too. Okay, but after that? I laughed at her enthusiasm. Sure, we'll come by. She waved and jogged into the show while I walked Moo to the grass. She's so happy and super nice. Wouldn't you be if you just got engaged? I thought about Liam giving me a ring and saying he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. Totally. But it's super inconvenient that Lex is not a suspect. I'm happy for her, but this ruins our idea of Lex as a suspect. Any chance Lex killed Cash earlier than they got engaged? Mary pursed her mouth and thought. We've been assuming the noise everyone heard was Cash hitting the ground, but maybe it was just a coincidence? She tapped a finger to her mouth. No, that wouldn't work because Cash was in the photos. What? Where? I followed Moo around as he did his business. The pictures of their engagement. Cash was in the background of a picture leaving the bar. There was no time for Lex to go kill him. I'm glad. I would hate for Dre to be upset. She seems so nice and seems to really like us. Well, that doesn't happen every day, which really is shocking because we're delightful. Moo kicked blades of grass behind him with stiff legs, signaling he was done. We stepped into the building and moved toward the entrance when a voice rang out and Sarah ran up to us. What is going on with your article? I've had no less than 3 people come up to me and insist that they see the article before we publish it. I hit a snicker while Mary calmed Sarah down. Don't worry, I have a rough draft right here. She patted her messenger bag. We need to go let people know we're here, but you can look it over later. You're going to love it, and they'll love it. I promise. We jogged into the exhibit hall, and I ignored Moo's growls as we passed Karma. People were milling about with ropes and heavy equipment. I was lagging a few steps behind Mary. I guess they are getting ready to move her. Moo will be happy. She nodded, and we continued racing through the crowd to the Westmound booth. When we arrived, we ran into Liam and Orion leaving. "Glad you guys made it." Liam leaned over slightly to pet Moo. "We have a couple more meetings, then all afternoon is free for the four of us to hit the show floor. Indy dropped this off for you." He pulled a memory card out of his pocket and handed it to me. He said he had to cancel lunch to work. "Thanks. We'll see you later." Orion smiled at Mary, and her ears tinged pink. I waved goodbye, then dragged Mary to the Westmound Training Center booth that was still set up. "Put this in your computer. Maybe there's something on there." Mary loaded it up. The footage starts with a shot of Moose, Cold, Candy, and Indy in front of the camera with the lights up. Mary clicked the volume off and hit the fast forward. Within a few seconds, people filled up the screen, with Indy disappearing behind the camera and Candy, Cold, and Moose moving down to the front of the stage. Mary sped it up a bit more. The three heads bobbed and bounced but never left the screen. Dang! I really wanted Moose, or even Cold or Candy, to be a suspect. I know, me too. We watched the rest of the clip, then Mary closed the computer. So who killed Cash and how? Hannah is the only one left without an alibi. Cash was spending all their money on the show, but either she had help from someone we haven't thought of, which we can't prove, or she did it alone somehow, which we can't prove either. Mary nodded and packed up her bag. We'll figure it out. Maybe something will happen while we walk around with the boys this afternoon. She sighed and rested her face on her hand with a little smile. Let's go see Dre and meet Lex now so we don't have to stop later. Come on, Moo. Mary located the booth on the map and we headed off. I was energized after sleeping in and excited about the afternoon. You know what, Mary? If we don't catch the killer, I don't think I care. This has been an awesome trip already. She smiled at me. A very good trip. We approached the Lexus Hunting Solutions booth and spotted Dre, her head towering over Lex. He was arranging some equipment as we walked over and introduced ourselves and shook hands. Dre excitedly explained to Lex, "We all rode over on the bus this morning. I insisted they come meet you." She looked down at Lex, her cheeks pink. "I'm glad Dre didn't have to ride over here alone. I hated leaving so early this morning, but I'm hoping to sell the stuff. We hadn't planned on taking it home, so there's no room in the truck. Any chance you need it?" I chuckled. I don't even know what you're trying to sell. Let me show you. He fell into a practice sales pitch. It's my newest product to help everyone have an easy and enjoyable experience after your animal is down. It's the Deer Load and Lift, but don't be tricked by its name. It will lift and load animals of any size. He moved over to a piece of equipment that looked vaguely like an oversized sideless wagon. You can tip the top to make it easy to lift the animal on it. Then you turn this knob and pump the handle. The whole platform lifts up to help you load the animal into the truck. A prickling feeling of unease went down my back. This was in your room until this morning? Yes. We sold it to Cash, but he had his accident before he could pick it up. I kneeled down and felt a bolt along the long side. Crouching down, I placed my hand on the floor, and right at elbow height was a bolt. As I leaned in close, there was paint stuck to the bolt. I angled my head to see where there were dark red spots on the axle underneath. I swallowed hard. Lex laughed at me. Nothing much interesting under there. Hey, Hannah, let me get you that check. I sat up to look at Hannah. You killed Cash and you did it alone. Chapter 9. Hannah ran. Moo barked and leaped after her, dragging me across the floor from where I had been. Mary ran after me. She used the Deer Lift and Load to throw Cash over the wall? Moo circled on his leash while barking. I was thoroughly tangled as he bounded around. Mary offered me a hand to get up, then took Moo's leash so I could unwrap myself. We ran after Hannah, dodging between people. Luckily, there weren't many short blonde females at the show. Moo barked as we ran, and Hannah turned around. She ran into the back of Moose, but caught herself and continued running. She turned toward the entrance, and we were gaining on her, but right as we turned the corner, the air was filled with screams and a crash rocked the ground. We slowed down and surveyed the scene. Karma had fallen over, and her outstretched foam hand pinned one of Hannah's legs to the floor. Hannah was screaming, "Get it off me!" As we approached, a man was saying to anyone that would listen, "She shoved me out of the way. I couldn't hold on. She pushed me." Hannah spotted me, screamed, and jerked at her leg. "You killed Cash," I said. "You did it." The crowd around her gasped and stared at me. She burst into tears. "It wasn't my fault. He attacked me and I had to protect myself. I had to. I thought he was already dead. I had no choice." She burrowed her face into her hands. An officer stepped forward and told everyone to step away. Chaos had engulfed the crowd and we moved back. Moose sniffed the white yeti on the ground and lifted his legs on the foam foot of Karma. Mary snorted. "I guess that Karma got her in the end, eh?" Sitting at the airport the next day, I scratched Moo's neck while Mary read an article titled, "Killer Beauty Queen Caught at the OIT Show." Once the police were done questioning us, the rest of the show had been a blast. Sarah had loved the article, and after it was published, everyone mentioned loved us as well. We had spent ample time with Orion and Liam checking out the show. We were stopped often by people that wanted to talk to one or both of them, but they always wrapped it up quickly. We had visited the two optics companies, Focal Optics and Crystal Clear Optics, and gotten a bit more information. I had met about 1 million people, and my heart was so full I could barely stand it. Mary folded up the paper and set it aside. "Well, that was interesting." "What did the newspaper say?" She had cashed out all their bank accounts the day after he died and had fake IDs in her car, but she's claiming that it was self-defense. He attacked her when they went to Lex's room to pick up their stuff, and she protected herself. After she hit him on the back of the head, she thought he was dead and that no one would ever believe her, so she used the deer lift and go to get him high enough to push over the wall. "I don't buy that." "I don't think anyone does. Turns out she had 2 other husbands die mysteriously, and she disappeared right afterwards. Once when she was a beauty queen, and another when she was a professional cheerleader. There are 2 other states that are interested in talking to her." Mary put her fingers up to do air quotes, and I shook my head. Orion and Liam wrangled the last of the luggage next to us. Orion took the seat on the other side of Mary, but Liam stood in front of me. "Di, can we talk?" Immediately my stomach dropped. I handed Mary Moo's leash. Nothing good ever started that way. "Of course." I stood up and followed him over to an empty chair. We sat in 2 chairs, but he didn't look at me. My stomach flipped in my belly, and I wanted to throw up. My mind raced with all the awful things that he could tell me. "You're freaking me out, Liam. What's going on?" He looked up at me. "I told you that I would help you set up your bow and do the training blog, but I think I need to go back with Mom and Orion to Salt Lake." "Forever?" No, just for a month, maybe 2. We've a lot of work to do after the show, and there's a couple more coming up. I was supposed to be at the center in Wyoming until November, but I ended up staying longer. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't look away from his eyes. "Why did you stay?" Our knees were touching as we leaned together in the corner, and he laid a warm hand on my knee. "I had something I needed to do, but the rest of my work has fallen behind. If I go for a while, I can catch up and come back to the center soon." "Okay, is that all? You're really scaring me. I don't know, but..." I stopped and left the rest unsaid. "I can call, and if you have any questions about equipment or anything, let me know. Moo can come with me as well if you want." "No, Moo's home is the center, and he's staying with me. You can't leave and take my dog with you. You really are coming back, right?" I felt devastated and overdramatic. It wouldn't be that long, and I really didn't have a claim on him. "Definitely. Thanks for understanding." He squeezed my knee, and we headed back to join Mary. I sat next to her. Liam's going back to Salt Lake to get work done for a bit. Mary looked at him. What about the tournament in a few weeks? It's Di's birthday and her first competition. He smiled at her. I know. Orion offered to drive me out that weekend. We can both be there. Oh, Mary turned and smiled at Orion. And the tournament in Vegas? Orion chuckled. We will both be there. We're always there anyway. And Mary was on a roll. That weekend is Valentine's Day. You guys should take us out on a proper date. Reservations, flowers, the whole shebang. Liam put an arm around my shoulder. Sounds like a plan, boss. I put a hand on Moo's head and scratched behind his ears. We were both going to miss Liam terribly, but we had a tournament season to prepare for and a proper date to look forward to. Life was getting better all the time, and I couldn't wait for Valentine's Day.
The end. This has been Death at the Trade Show, Target Practice Mysteries 3, written by Nikki Haverstock, narrated by the author. For more information about Nikki Haverstock's books, please go to nikkihaverstock.com.